We're going to go to the next section in the agenda, which is the approval section. And I need an approval of the agenda. And so may I have a motion?
So moved.
May I have a second?
A second.
And this is the approval of agenda. Can I take a voice vote? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Now we're going to ask for an approval of our January 24th, 2022 regular and executive session minutes. May I have a motion?
So moved.
And may I have a second?
Second.
And this will be a voice vote. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? No. All right. Motion passes. And now we're coming to our audience comment section. Audience comments are always welcome. Please know the board asks that anyone addressing the board complete a form. The link is on the board agenda page and is also posted in a news item on the District 34 homepage. Comments are to be 3 minutes or less. This participation period will have a total time limit of 45 minutes. And finally, this is an opportunity for community members to address the board, but the board does not respond during the public comment section of our meetings. We will have a second public comment section later in our meeting. Kathy, do we have any comments?
Yes, we do.
I just want to explain that Kathy is going to be pulling you into our meeting, and it'd be great if you could turn your camera on so we can see you when you talk also, please.
And our first speaker is April Perry. April, I'm bringing you on to the screen.
Hello, everyone. I am speaking tonight on what I believe to be a majority of Glenview parents who are in favor of masking. You all are used to hearing from the people who are unhappy, not the people who are happy with what the status quo is. And so I'm speaking for those of us who are very grateful that our children have been kept in school and safe for the last 6 months. Those of us who have children who are too young to be vaccinated, and those of us who have children with teachers who are immunocompromised or family members who are immunocompromised. All of us are asking you to keep the mask mandate in place until the end of the school year. I also look forward to a time when masks are no longer necessary, but that time is not now. The regional data is roughly the same, if not worse than it was at the start of this school year. That chart that you've used in the past to signal a return to remote learning, that chart still has yellow and red squares throughout it. The data simply does not support a removal of masks at this time. Moreover, vaccines are not available for children under the age of 5, which means that any child who's in preschool, who is a close contact to someone who has COVID, actually has to stay home from preschool for 10 days. This is an untenable position for families who are working, many of whom have already had multiple quarantines over the last several weeks and months. Your duty is also to our youngest children, and I'm hoping that you will keep them safe. I'm asking that you keep the mask mandate in place. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments.
The next participant is Mary Beth Dar. Mary Beth, I will be bringing you on as a panelist.
Sorry, can you hear me? Okay, now I lost my notes. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak tonight. I really appreciate it. I am asking the board to please lift these mask mandates and let's start a return to normal in our schools. It's long overdue. This isn't about taking away the ability to wear a mask. It's about giving parents and children the choice of what works best for them and their families and making mask wearing optional. I hear parents saying over and over and over again, it's no big deal. It's just cloth over the face. My kids are fine with it. Kids are resilient. And I think to myself, if that's the case, then why is mental health at crisis proportions for our youth? Why do I see post after post in all of the different Facebook mom groups asking for referrals for youth therapists? All anonymous, of course, but then there are no openings for several months because social workers and therapists are overloaded. I'm here tonight because I'm very concerned about this crisis of mental health in our children. Analysis of 29 studies published by reputable organizations such as JAMA, American Academy of Pediatrics, the CDC, and HHS have revealed some very troubling statistics. 20 to 25% of our school-age children are newly experiencing depressive and/or anxiety symptoms. Eating disorder hospitalizations found a 120% increase. And emergency room visits from suspected suicide attempts increased 51% in adolescent girls. Many people don't really know what anxiety looks like. As someone who has struggled with it for decades, I can tell you exactly what anxiety looks like. It's when you worry about something, which is normal, but then your worries gradually start to turn into your reality. When a negative what if scenario turns into perceived real life, even though it's not real life at all. You can become so debilitated by what your thoughts are telling you that you no longer think rationally and can't sort fear from reality. And this is exactly what we are doing to our kids. It's not about the mask themselves. It's about what we're telling our kids with regards to the mask. Wear that mask so you don't kill your teacher, Bobby. How would you feel if you gave grandma COVID and she died, Susie? Imagine that weight being put on your shoulders as a young child for 2 years. It's unconscionable, in my opinion. We're long overdue for these strict mandates to be lifted on our children. Study after study show from all over the world that children are not the main vectors of disease and schools are areas of low transmission. Moreover, we have a very high vaccination rate among teachers in our district. We just need to start putting the children first, and they should not be bearing the brunt of this pandemic anymore. It's time to lift the mandates and start the return to normal, or at the very least, it's time to show us the metrics that will allow us a return to normal. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your comments this evening. Thanks for joining us.
Right. Next, we have Heather Cartwright. Okay, welcome, Heather.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. All right. Well, my name is Heather Cartwright, and I truly appreciate the opportunity to speak this evening. For those of you who don't know me, which is a lot of you, my son is an 8th grader at Springman, and my daughter's a 2nd grader at Lyon Elementary. And I just want to say that both of my kids have had amazing experiences in Glenview, and I truly appreciate the support that you guys provide for the teachers that are working tirelessly to create this positive learning environment for them. This has been, as you all know, an incredibly difficult 2 years. So hopefully they continue to receive that support from you. I chose to speak tonight because I'm becoming increasingly concerned that some of the loudest voices in the community will falsely be perceived as the majority. I think it's inevitable that we will move to a mask optional environment, and I think it's a goal we should all be striving for. However, I don't think it needs to be a decision that's made because of political pressure or threatening emails or any of the other fairly alarming things that I've seen in other school board meetings in our area. So I'm asking you guys to please consider the following when making your decision. We need established metrics determined by public health officials for when we should pivot between a mask optional and a mask mandate. As the science will continue to evolve, it's going to continue to evolve and throw us a few more fun surprises. I also think it's really important to take into account the staffing shortage that we're already facing. I personally would rather have my children taught by their teacher versus somebody who doesn't know the curriculum and who's unable to provide for them what they need. And I also think it's really important that teachers and families have time to provide, to make decisions for their own family and also to prepare their kids for this. The kids have been through a lot. And my fear is that if this happens really suddenly, we're going to have a bunch of kids in school behaving how the adults in many cases are behaving in our communities. And they need to know how to talk about this, and they need to know how to handle their playmate at recess who doesn't support the same political ideology as they do. And they're little and they're going to need a lot of direct instruction on how to do this. So yes, thank you so much for all that you do. The fact that you guys are still working tirelessly for our school says a lot about who you are as people, because you have been through a lot. That's it. That's all I have. Thank you so much. I appreciate your support.
Thank you very much for your comments this evening, and thanks for joining us.
And next we have Anastasia Ivanova. All right, Anastasia.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay, for some reason, I don't think my video is on and I don't know how to turn it on. So I'll just go if that's okay with you.
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, I have one question for this board, but I'd like to preface it with some facts. The CDC released information that cloth and surgical masks do not protect anyone. N95 masks protect the person who is wearing it. There are multiple studies that show infection and transmission in children and adolescents is low. There are studies that show prolonged wearing of masks is harmful to children's physical and emotional health and causes developmental delays. The court ruled that IDPH and ISB's emergency rules are void and illegal, and each student by law is entitled to due process. Just today, JCAR voted 9-0 to block the re-implementation of Pritzker's emergency rules. We have our board, some of the board members emailing concerned parents that their children are not deserving of due process because they don't agree with the judge's ruling and think it's not going to hold up. The district has unfinished construction that's costing way more than expected. The government ESSER funding that the district receives is tied to keeping COVID mitigations in place, such as masks, shield testing, and holding vaccine clinics. So my question today for you is, why haven't you dropped the masks last week? Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you for your comments this evening.
Our next participant is Mais Albazi. And then after Mais, it is Laura Coleman, and I don't see the right name in the attendee list. So if Laura Coleman is here and can click the raise hand, I will pull you next as the next speaker after Mais.
Can you guys hear me? Hello. Thank you everyone for your time. My name is Mais Albazi and I have 3 kids in the district. This pandemic started and evolved into different versions. Version 1, flatten the curve and follow the science. Version 2, wear a mask. Version 3, get vaccinated. Version 4, get a second vaccine. Version 5, get boosted. Version 6, continue to wear a mask. Version 7, you can take your mask off at restaurants, bars, sporting activity, Lollapalooza, and rioting. Version 8, children must continue to wear a mask. I can continue on to talk about the inconsistencies, but I think you understand. If the inconsistencies were not enough, we had to sit there and watch a board member call our children that don't test knife wielders. As of yesterday, a board member told a parent to wear his mask on his genitalia, and I'm paraphrasing. We strive to teach our children to question logic for their everyday lives, but here we are told to follow the same logic and disregard our own thinking. Forcing one way of thinking is no longer a democracy, but a dictatorship. When science evolves, it evolves to include different hypotheses, theories, data, and conclusions. It is not a one-size-fits-all. You cannot force our children to one type of science, the type that allows you to reach into the purse of those that hold it. So a prudent, independent thinker would ask, at what point are we going to allow the community to govern themselves? You feel endangered, you protect yourself and your family the best way you know how. You cannot force someone to wear a life jacket because you cannot swim. It doesn't protect you. Same logic with this particular virus. At what point will you stop shaming these kids? At what point will you punish the teachers that shame our children and ask them about their vaccination status? At what point will you punish a teacher that walks the kids to the office and demand they wear 2 masks because a teacher's mother is in the hospital like you did to my child? The time has come and it has become clear that you are on one side only and have no interest in being fair to all. So your false claim of diversity, equity, and inclusion is a facade to this charade. We, the people, have had enough. You can no longer use our children as your pawns for your benefit as you see fit. Those that want to continue wear masks, please do, but you have no right to force my children to do the same because you believe it protects you, but I know it harms mine. Enough.
Thank you, Ms. Albazi. I just want to point out that your mention of 2 board members are not members of this board. Those are probably members of District 225 board. So I just want to point that out to the public. Thank you for joining us this evening and thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Next, we have Rich Hughes. Rich, I'll be bringing you on. Slowly but surely. Okay, Rich, you're here.
Mr. Hughes, are you able to unmute yourself? Thank you.
There we go. I've only participated in about 400 Zoom meetings in the last year. I still don't unmute myself and I still don't turn on the video when I think I have. So anyway, sorry about that. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the time. I agree 1,000% with those who want to see the mask mandate end. I believe the data is all around us. There don't need to be any more metrics developed by people at the Public Health Department of Illinois. Just look around, children are not dropping like flies in Sweden or Tennessee or Florida or Texas or South Dakota or anywhere else. This particular virus is not really much of a problem for kids. The flu is more dangerous many years than this virus is. And like other speakers have said, masks don't work. There have been studies that have shown it time and time again. And masks and vaccines do not protect everyone else. And when have we ever in America ever put the burden on our children to protect everybody else? It's unconscionable. I can't believe we're still doing it. And there is just no data that supports keeping masks on our kids. And there's a lot of stuff that indicates that things are really, really bad, from CO2 buildup way past the normal level and what's considered a safe level of CO2 in their systems to all of the problems with all the psychological problems. I wish Tony Fauci were 40 years younger so he would he would still be alive and could be sued for what he's done, 10, 15, 20 years from now with all the probably neurotic and other problems, neurotic children and other problems that we have. So I think it's clear that the mask mandate needs to go away. If people want to wear masks, that's fine. They can wear masks, but like other speakers have said, don't tell me my child has to wear a mask. She doesn't. She's healthy. This is not dangerous for her, and it is definitely not her burden to protect everybody else. And we know that it's about 700 kids or so have died from COVID. They all had comorbidities. We also have a CDC with 21,000 employees and a $15 billion annual budget, and yet we still have no analysis of how many people have actually died from COVID versus with COVID. But there's more and more and more data coming out showing that everybody who gets admitted to the hospital, if they happen to test positive for COVID, they're called a COVID case, even though they might have a broken leg. I think we're going to find out down the road that a huge percentage of this is just hysteria. We've gone crazy. And it's time for everybody to just take a breath and think about what we're doing, especially to our kids. They're the least vulnerable. They're the most important part of our society. If your child is, I just can't believe what we're doing to our kids. We have got to stop. We have got to think about the kids. And if you're concerned as an adult, get your health taken care of, wear a mask, wear a shield, wear gloves, do whatever you want to do as an adult. But we need to take our kids out of this equation, give them their childhood back. There is zero data that shows that they're in grave danger. There is zero data that shows that they're dropping like flies. They are not.
Mr. Hughes, thank you. Your 3 minutes are up. I appreciate your input and thanks for sharing tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Liz McLaughlin. Liz, I'll bring you on.
Now, okay, you can probably hear me now. Okay,
We can hear you. Thank you for joining us.
thank you. I am a parent of a student at Hanking. And first and foremost, I want to thank you all for all that the board, teachers, and staff has done to keep our schools largely open and keep everyone involved safe. This is a huge accomplishment and demonstrates that the decisions made and the actions taken thus far are working. I also acknowledge that you all, as school board members, you've been put in a tough position to make unpopular decisions, and it's not fun. And this includes the resolution you're discussing on masking tonight, on whether or not to make it optional. And I respect that you all have thus far followed the advice and recommendations of local and statewide public health experts. And again, this has ultimately resulted in keeping our children and staff safe. My ask for you tonight is that you continue to consult with and follow the recommendations of these experts when you consider the resolution that's before you tonight. And even if this means not making any decision on that resolution tonight, if you need more time to deliberate. There is simply too much at stake here to preemptively relax universal masking before recommended by the experts. I'll give a few reasons here. One, we need to keep the schools open for our kids. I fear that lifting this too early could lead to a spike in cases that might warrant a pause in in-person learning. Two, there are many in our community that remain high risk despite being vaccinated. Some of these individuals may be the parent or guardian of the District 34 child, or even a teacher or staff member. Some may also be students at District 44, and this includes my son who has a heart condition. Three, not all children in the community are eligible for the vaccine at this time. Many of them likely have siblings at District 34. Four, bullying. I fear that making masks optional at this time could lead to bullying of students that continue to wear the masks out of medical necessity. My son is already called names for wearing glasses. He was also called names the day I sent him to school when he wore 2 masks when Omicron first came out, and I didn't make him anymore because he came home crying because he got made fun of. And finally, I worry about the impact of lifting the universal masking may have on our teachers and the healthcare system who are already stressed. So to be clear, I am hopeful that we can honestly eventually move away from universal masking and when circumstances warrant. But I also hope that any decision to do so is based on peer-reviewed science and recommendations of experts in the field. I am also advocating for a flexible approach where universal masking can be readopted if circumstances warrant. And I feel that adopting metrics could be helpful here, with such metrics possibly based on Cook County Department of Public Health recommendations and or the number of hospitalizations or cases in the community, schools, or even in specific classrooms. So again, just thank you for all you're doing, and thank you for all of our teachers and staff.
Thank you for joining us tonight, and thank you for your comments. Thank you so much.
Right, and next we have Nanette Ross Meredith.
Good evening. I'm Nanette Ross Meredith, the math interventionist at Pleasant Ridge and president of the Glenview Education Association. I am speaking on behalf of our membership as we work each and every day to provide all of the children in District 34 a high quality, safe, and emotionally supportive education. We're asking our school district not to make any rash decisions changing COVID safety requirements. We should be focused on our students, not worrying about health and safety. The consideration of mask optional, as indicated in the board agenda, is a concern to the GEA membership. The majority of our members have been extremely disheartened to learn of the consideration by our Board of Education and Administration to move to a mask optional policy without updated guidance for schools from the CDC. We should not be abandoning our safety protocols for keeping staff and students safe without the backing of the CDC, IDPH, and ISBE. We've been able to keep our schools open with these safety measures in place. We know that in-person learning is the best way for our students to learn, and we should be doing everything we can continue to meet in person. Our students thrive on consistency, and the last 2 years have been anything but consistent. We do not want a disruption in our students' learning as we are bridging the learning gap for them, which was created by the pandemic. In order to avoid yo-yoing on these COVID requirements, let's let the courts make their decision and take that time to formulate a plan that best serves the students, families, and staff in our district. A few things to consider. With the board considering a mask optional learning environment, what plans have been made for some of the most pressing issues that would impact the classroom? For example, how are teachers and staff to support both the masked and unmasked students? What tools will be put in place to help teachers help students and guide their respect of others? What guidance will be provided for interactions between unmasked and masked students when parents request that their masked child be separate from the unmasked child? What safety guidance will be provided to ensure the health and well-being of staff, students, or their close family members who have serious medical conditions, such as cancer or debilitating autoimmune conditions? These are only 3 of many examples that demonstrate the need for thoughtful and science-based decision-making, which will affect all members of our school community. We look forward to engaging in future conversations with you about current mitigations in place and adjustments to them to keep staff and students safe and in school. The only way we got through the last 2 years was by working together, and we need to continue to do so. Our students deserve a team of parents, community members, educators, and other stakeholders behind them. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your comments, and thank you for joining us tonight.
And next we have Laura Coleman.
Hi, sorry. Hi. Okay. So here we are again. Thank you to the board. Thank you to our teachers and other staff for working to maintain a healthy and safe environment and making the best of a truly resolved testing 2+ years. You are so appreciated, and I'm so very sorry that we are back here again facing those who would throw a lot of your good work back in your faces. So regarding masks, I feel at this time we should follow the advice of state officials and wait to vote on any resolution to make masks optional until the end of the month at the very least. In the meantime, here are some things to think about. So, contrary to some opinions, wearing masks isn't living in fear. It is living in kindness. It is taking care of the people around us. And that's what I tell my kids when they ask why we still have to wear masks. They get it. Being uncomfortable for a few hours is not a civil rights issue, full stop. Asking people to care about the health and well-being of another human being by doing something that could protect them from serious illness isn't a war crime. So seriously, enough of that. And lastly, operating with an abundance of caution isn't some deep state plot by the board to misappropriate funds, screw us over, or the indoctrination of our kids to just shut up and submit, or whatever other tinfoil hat conspiracy someone cooked up on a Tuesday morning. And I'll close with this. When asked, does wearing a mask in school get in the way of having a good time? My fourth grade daughter's response was, why would you even ask that question? No. So thank you for your time. School board, you are so very much appreciated. Thank you so much for letting me speak.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us tonight, and thank you for your comments.
And next we have Maruna Zamfarescu. Maruna, I will bring you over, and I hope I pronounced your name properly.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry, I was not prepared. Hello, my name is Miruna Zamfirescu, and I have 2 masked children at Springman. Why aren't masks optional at this point? What are we doing? Are we becoming more afraid the milder this virus gets and the more protection and treatments we have? It seems we worry more about liability, fear, power, money, other people's health than our own children. Children should come first, no matter what. Your hesitation and lack of leadership have divided this community. It is so disheartening to see my neighbors being unkind to each other just because they disagree on mitigations. And the kids are watching us. What is the example we are setting? Kids are being turned against each other. We promote kindness in schools, and yet we argue because we weigh risk versus benefits differently. Of course we do. We have different upbringings and different life experiences. We are a community, and we do not need to agree on everything. We do not need to constantly judge each other and point fingers. It is not a contest on who has highest morals or most virtue. At least one thing should unite us: what is best for our children. We vacation in so many places where people just go on about their lives normally. And then we return home, back to emergency mode. I feel as if we're locked in somewhere and everyone else is outside living life normally. How do I explain this to my children? How is this virus more dangerous here than almost anywhere else in the country? I should not have to sacrifice my children's mental health over other people's fears. Asking for choice is not selfish, but forcing someone to live a certain way to accommodate others is. Everyone complied with all the measures for 2 years now. We took vaccines and boosters and wear a mask, but now most of us want to move on and live life. I am as accommodating as I can be, but not when it interferes with my children's well-being. I draw the line there. Get all the vaccine doses, wear the masks, the N95s, KN95s, PPEs, hazmat suits, sleep in them, whatever it takes. I am all for it, but please let others move on. I mean, this is Omicron, and we are on 3rd and 4th vaccine dose. Look, I have an immunocompromised immediate family member. I've lost loved ones. I get it. But it's time to put children first. The social, emotional toll that continuing COVID protocols have taken on them is more harmful than the virus itself. That is a fact. So no, they are not fine. Why are we putting a burden on our kids to protect others? Children have 0% chance to be severely affected by this virus. What are we protecting them from? Freedom of choice, a normal childhood? My question to the board is this. Are you more concerned about everyone and everything else but the kids? What exactly are our priorities here? Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us tonight, and thank you for your comments.
Next is Colleen Conasec Scott. Colleen, bring you on.
My name is Colleen Conasec Scott. I was born and raised in Glenview, and I graduated from GVS. My mom was a principal in Glenview for over 15 years and actually has a street named in her honor just a few blocks from Westbrook. To me, Glenview is home. With such deep roots, it was always important for me to raise a family here. Now, we have 2 boys in District 34. One of them is my profile picture. And I feel trapped in a situation where the fate of my children, of our children, is out of our control. As the parent of a child with special needs, these past 2 years has been an utter nightmare. Our youngest son, Brooks, suffered a vaccine injury in 2019 and was left with a brain disorder called apraxia. Apraxia is the loss of the ability to do something. In Brooks' case, it affects his ability to speak. Children and adults with apraxia know what they want to say, but are unable to form the words. Early intervention is crucial, and the illogical restriction still in place by our district has robbed him of this chance. Children like Brooks need unrestricted access to the lips and to the face of themselves, their peers, and teachers in order to have any chance at intelligible speech. They need to be able to visually observe cues when working with their teachers. Needless to say, the social and physical restrictions placed on him have only magnified the challenges that lay ahead in developing his ability to communicate with the world. With that said, masking and vaccines are not a one-size-all solution, a one-size-fits-all solution. They were never meant to be, and they never will be. My son is a perfect example of that. Going mask optional gives parents the power to choose and have the ability to accommodate everyone equally. Those that feel they need the protection of a mask can choose to wear an N95 and pursue vaccinations if that's what they feel is the right choice for them. Those children who cannot tolerate a mask or have issues like my son can choose not to wear one. The bottom line is what might be right for your child may not be right for mine. Masks are not keeping our schools open. No one makes a decision with more love than a parent for their child. I firmly believe that. I hope we can all recognize and respect this, whatever side you are on. No one is winning in the current situation. Tensions are high, relationships are strained, and our community is torn apart. Yet our children are bearing the most heavy burden of all. Our children have done their part, and why are we putting the burden on them to protect others when the rest of the world is moving on? Now it's time for them to allow them to have the childhood and education they deserve. To the board, I ask you to do the right thing for Brooks and for all of the children whose voices cannot be heard. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you so much for your comments. Kathy, are we?
Okay, and next we have Elizabeth Wirtz.
Hello there. Hopefully you can hear me. My name is Elizabeth Wirtz, and I'm the mother of 2 in District 34. On February 4th, Judge Gersha granted a temporary restraining order against schools mandating masks for plaintiffs of the case. D34 was one of the defendants, and now several families within the district have been granted the right to send their kids to school without masks. As stated in the case, the plaintiffs were seeking due process under the law be afforded to them should they choose to object to being quarantined, which by definition includes masks, as well as subject to vaccination and testing. In the ruling, the judge agreed and thus granting the TRO. She also made note that although the class certification was denied, the court had declared IDPH and ISVE emergency rules in overreach and thus void. Today, the Illinois Joint Committee of Administrative Rules voted against extending the IDPH emergency rule on school mask mandates. I fear that by denying other children their due process, D34 is breaking the law and setting itself up for legal liability. I'll put aside my concern for the interpretation of the law for right now. In the email sent on February 6th, the superintendent indicated that we were following the opening plan. In rereading the plan, I see that we are using data-driven decisions and clear communications. Over the past 2 years, many have questioned, what are the metrics? I've not seen answers from the board that clearly outline the data points that will be used to determine when masks are no longer required. Without clear guidelines, it leads to suspicion and distrust. People begin to question, what is driving the decisions? Are there other motives at play unrelated to the health and mental well-being of our students? Is there even a plan? Without a clearly communicated plan and defined metrics, suspicion creeps in and leads to division. You can see the cracks forming in the community. Since IDPH and ISBE emergency rules have been voided, the board now fully owns the decision. So I ask, what are the metrics and when does this end? Naperville 203 was in a similar situation to D34. They were named as a defendant in the case and initially went forward with keeping the masks in place and mandates in place. They've recently changed course and are mask optional. Their email to the community stated that, quote, based on Naperville 203 metrics and our ability to successfully mitigate risk, we are confident that we are ready to adjust our mitigations and continue to provide a safe learning environment for all. As we see communities surrounding us changing course and stating their confidence in keeping everyone safe, what is holding us back? Have we not invested in better filtration, KN95s for those who want them, encourage vaccines for staff and students alike? What makes Naperville ready to move forward and not D34? The world has changed a lot in 2 years. When the virus came along, we at first did not know it was scary. And then I see the time, good, thank you. And then we've learned more and we know who it adversely affects and have the better tools in our arsenal to fight this. It's time to move forward with a mask optional approach. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments and thank you for joining us.
Next, we have Renata Gercianu. Renata, please correct me with your name pronunciation.
Hello, it's Renata Gergicianu.
Thank you.
I have a fourth grader at Hoffman. I'm here to support the mask optional for children in our schools. Please do not confuse my being here and talking on behalf of mask optional with the possibility that I do not appreciate the job of our teachers, administrators, or the board. I know that you all have a tough job to do, especially now, and that you cannot please everyone. I'm here to express the opinion of many who might not want to get involved for one reason or the other. I know there's 8,000 of us and just a few on this call. I do not blame them. If we look at what just happened last night during District 225 board meeting, who would want to have the possibility of being insulted for expressing an opinion by the same people who put rules in place, rules that were meant to keep these meetings orderly? I'm not saying this will happen here tonight, and 1 hour into this meeting, I know we have raised above that. We are a small community that we should be able to have, and we should be able to have a civilized dialogue and express our opinions freely. I feel that at this point in time, we are stuck with no way out of this madness. An exit plan was not clearly communicated to us, the parents. What metrics, what planets need to align so we can finally unmask the children? And those who want to keep the masks until they think it's right for them, please do so. Nobody's taking those away from you. I've been silent for the past 2 years. Our family has followed every protocol put in place by this board, but I will not stay silent no more. I'm asking you to look at other communities that surround us. Look at the other 40 plus states in this nation that have implemented mask optional. Look at states who had in-person learning, some mask free, without significant evidence that today they're in a worse situation than we are. What do they know and we don't? Let's not follow the political science anymore in making COVID-related decisions and look at evidence. Please tell me what's going to happen on February 28th when the mask mandate is being lifted. I suspect that the vast majority of us will stop wearing a mask. We are going to enjoy our lives in large settings with friends and family. But come Monday morning, we are expected to strap an N95 mask on our children's faces and send them to school to somehow feel good about our COVID mitigation protocol. It's not okay to use our children as buffers or somehow blame them for the fact that COVID is still around. COVID is not going anywhere, and we need to be more creative and find ways to deal with it without punishing or putting the burden solely on one age group that has been shown to suffer more psychologically from all the mandates than COVID itself. And it's not the kid's fault if somebody gets sick. Please don't punish them anymore. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you for your comments this evening.
Next is Sonia Tomasevic.
Sonia, are you able to unmute? Thank you.
Yes, hi. Let's see, can you guys see me?
Can't see you, but we can hear you.
Hold on, working on it.
Ah,
Hi.
we can see you. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name is Sonia Tomicevic. I have 2 kids in District 34. I grew up during the Balkan War. As a child, I learned a hard way what it means to be homeless, hungry, and discriminated against. Coming to America was my only family's choice and the best possible blessing we could ever pray for. Because at that time, America was land of free and brave. Much has changed since then. Now my children, who I have taught to first love themselves and respect themselves, and then everybody else, no matter their color, religion, or financial status, are now being discriminated against because they came to school without a mask. They're not allowed to go to their classes, receive the same education as their peers because they do not want to wear a mask. My 12-year-old daughter is the only child in Springman that chooses not to wear a mask and has been kept in boys' locker room since last week. Denied to go to lunchroom, her classes, or even outside because she does not want to wear a mask. In the whole Springman school building, administration could not find one classroom, one office for one child to stay in without a mask all day. Please tell me, how would you feel if that was your daughter? My 8-year-old is better treated in Glen Grove, as she also chooses not to wear a mask with her 2 brave friends that keep her company. But still, they're not allowed to go there to their classes or participate in activities as their peers. They, however, are allowed to go to lunchroom and outside, even do yoga. How do you explain this? 2 different schools, 1 same district. What is even more sad and disturbing is that the good teachers and the principals that do not agree with the same policies that they have to follow are afraid to stand up for the same students that they say they care for so much because of the bullies like you. If District 34 teachers and principals are afraid of you, how do we expect our kids to stand up against you? That is why God gave us parents like us to fight for them. Parents, listen to me. Our kids are more important than our statuses, jobs, and careers. They're our future. Teach them to love, respect, and think for themselves. Teach them to question everything and everyone with respect, of course, because future of this country depends on it. God bless you all, and make masks optional because they already are everywhere else except in District 34. I want to close this with the Glen Grove statement: spread positivity, share a smile, be kind, pass it on. How are we supposed to do this with the masks on? Please explain. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us and thank you for your comments this evening.
Next, we have Dana Russo.
I believe that will take us to our 45-minute window after Dana. So can Dana be our last speaker at this session? And we do have another session, I want to remind everyone. Is that all right? Can I ask how many people we have queued right now?
Yeah, let me count that. Hold on one sec.
24.
20, yeah, 24.
Okay, I think we'll end public comment, like we have said, after 45 minutes, and which will be after Ms. Russo. And then the other commenters can stay and comment at the end of our second comment session.
Okay. Is everybody able to hear me? I have a daughter who is signed to speak after me, but she has to get to bed soon. So if you don't mind, I would love to defer my time to my daughter since she's been patiently waiting. You have Chloe Coster after me, hopefully. I'd like to give her.
But we're stopping our comments after you. So.
Okay, I'm going to defer it to her since she's so been patiently and brave waiting.
I will do that. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your time. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Chloe Coster. I go to Pleasant Ridge School. I'm in 4th grade. One fact about me is that I've been in Pleasant Ridge School for 2 years now, and I've never been in Pleasant Ridge School without a mask. That honestly makes me feel really sad. I can't imagine how other people might feel too. I came to school to learn and not argue with other classmates about masks. Talking about masks can create arguments among students. I don't want to hurt other kids' feelings, but I do believe it is time for us to be able to go to school without masks. I want things to be normal again. I want to be able to see my teacher smile. I want to be able to hear them clearly. I want to see my classmates when we talk to each other and interact with each other. I recently requested a meeting with our assistant principal and asked her, why are we still wearing masks when the judge said we can go mask optional? If kids want to wear a mask and they feel more comfortable, that is fine by me. But please give us a choice. I would like to ask the leaders to please go mask optional. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for speaking. Ms. Russo, there's still a minute and a half left if you would like to add.
Well, I think I was going to kind of mimic some of the things that other people said and kind of try to abbreviate things here. I think there's definitely clear and evidence and data that is even reported by the CDC that looks at pediatric hospitalizations, comparing masked states to unmasked states, and showing those numbers are really comparable. I think we've, in some respect, lost perception of our numbers and have perpetuated some fear among parents and patients and children. I'm a mom and a physician in this community for over 20 years, so I feel pretty passionate about this subject and really passionate about protecting the public. But it's definitely time to move forward to mask optional. We're going to be one of 8 states that are mandating masks, and over 500 districts in this state are now going mask optional based on the TRO ruling. These states and the rest of these districts are not putting kids at risk. They are definitely trying to mitigate risks of masking at this point, with the increased risk of depression, anxiety, suicide risks, speech and developmental delays. We have to start acknowledging that those are real repercussions of our decisions of masking at one point, and those efforts were necessary, but now it's time to move on and to protect these kids and take the burden off of them. Thank you so much for your time and for all your hard work.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you for your comments. And please tell your daughter she's a great public speaker. Thanks.
Oh, thank you very much.
Hi.
Hi. Okay. we are going to ask my dog to stop barking first, but we are going to be moving our meeting on for now. We will have a second comment period. So please, if you'd like to speak to us, we'll be able to hear you again, but it's time for us to move on with the rest of our meeting. And now we're going to move to the consideration of resolutions, the consent agenda. That is, here we have 3 resolutions. We have 22010, the personnel report. We have 22011, the payroll warrants report, and 22012, vendor warrants. Has everyone looked at those? Is there any questions? This is a consent agenda, so if I'm just going to ask for a motion to approve.
So moved.
So moved. Second it.
And there's a second from Mr. Heggie, and this will be a roll call vote. Katie?
Nolan?
All right, come off mute.
Heggie?
Aye.
Corman?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Jack Torowitz?
Aye.
Tom Stark?
Aye.
And Stefani?
Aye.
Okay, the motions carry. All of the consideration of resolutions and consent have passed.
Mr. Nelson, may I just interject something quickly?
Certainly.
Based on our personnel report, I'd like to offer a congratulations to Kristen Caceres, who will be serving as our new Assistant Superintendent for Student Services starting July 1st. Kristen, we will give you a more personal and proper introduction when we're meeting back in person again. And to Mary Garrity, we are certainly not saying goodbye to you yet. So don't get any ideas. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Now we're going to be moving to our F section, the consideration of other resolutions. Dr. Deli, would you like to start us off with some information?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. And have enjoyed hearing the different perspectives in our community, and I know we'll continue to do so during our next public comment session. I have a few comments I'd like to make before the board engages in its conversation surrounding the district's mitigation plan and specifically mask wearing. As you know, District 34 has been named as a defendant along with 144 other Illinois school districts in a lawsuit which sought a temporary restraining order for both named and unnamed plaintiffs to stop mandatory mask wearing and close contact exclusion in schools. On February 4th, a circuit court judge issued 2 rulings. The first ruling was to deny the requested class certification. This ruling made the temporary restraining order applicable to only those plaintiffs named in the suit. The second ruling was in favor of the plaintiffs named in the suit, which meant that the governor, IDPH, and ISB could no longer mandate mandatory mask wearing and close contact exclusion rules in schools for the named plaintiffs. Our legal defense team has advised us that nowhere in the ruling is a removal of a local school district's authority to enforce its own mitigation plan. That is why the decision was made to continue following our mitigation plan, which contains mandatory mask wearing. In the meantime, this lawsuit is on appeal, and a decision on the appeal is expected on Thursday. As the legal system operates, I implore everyone to allow our teachers, our support staff members, and our principals to do their work without threats and intimidation, as we have unfortunately seen in some cases. To our staff, please know that the board will indemnify you from liability and defense costs in any legal action pertaining to this matter. Setting aside for a moment the lawsuit and the legal system which needs to see this case through to completion, I believe it's important to understand that since the start of the pandemic, Governmental agencies at the federal, state, and local levels have been required to make decisions without the benefit of the totality of information that one would ideally desire. Decisions, however, are required, and pandemic-related decisions in particular are about balancing risk. These decisions are not binary and should not be viewed as simply good or bad. Along this COVID journey, we have always made a good faith effort to balance risks, and I understand completely that people are entitled to judge our work through their own set of beliefs. I'm not exactly sure how this pandemic ends, but I feel like we're moving toward the end of what has arguably been a very long neck on this hourglass. By any objective measure, and I understand for some there are no objective measures, our local COVID dashboard is much improved. Positivity rates, hospitalizations, ICU patients, and deaths all continue to decline. This is not to suggest that we have exited the pandemic, but simply to say that I do believe this is a reasonable time to reconsider our mitigation plan, and specifically the future of our current masking requirement. With respect to timing, I can only say that the court appeal will likely be rendered on Thursday. The governor has signaled that masking requirements for indoor venues will be relaxed on or near February 28th, but not for schools, hospitals, and nursing homes. And the Cook County Department of Public Health has issued a memo stating that the vaccination and masking order can be lifted in a similar timeframe. As recently as this afternoon, the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules has now weighed in on this matter. So wanted to just provide this as a very quick review, probably didn't seem quick, but a quick review and some context for what I now understand will be a board discussion on this topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Daly. It was a great summation of how we've gone along this path so far. Before we get to this consideration of other resolutions, I'd just like to reiterate that COVID mitigation decisions for District 34 are made by this board. Our teachers, support staff, and administrators are implementing the board decisions that we have agreed upon. And so please treat our teachers and administrators and support staff with the respect that they deserve. They are not supposed to be attacked. Thank you. Now let's move to our consideration of other resolutions. And this is number one on it, 22013, discussion and action to update the mitigation plan to move to an environment that recommends but does not require mask wearing in a school building. Let's move to a discussion. It's time to talk about this. Does anyone, would anyone like to go first? Mr. Heggie is raising his hand. Mr. Heggie, please.
Yes, thank you. So, I think that's a great summation that you both made on the legal standing of where the district is. This is a board decision. It's a local rule. There's nothing, no one has come forward from the state to say anything otherwise. So, it lies with us. And I think it's an appropriate time to review our mitigation plan because so much has changed. First, the legal status has changed. And secondly, the virus itself has changed. We're dealing with a variant that's substantially different than when it started. And I share a lot of people's frustration with the fact that we can't seem to get a metric on when we move in or out. And I just don't know if we ever can. Even with these incredibly low numbers we've had the last week or so, certainly compared to the incredibly high numbers we had in early January, that wouldn't, moving out of mandated masks probably wouldn't be appropriate if we were still dealing with Delta. And it might not be appropriate if we're dealing with, whatever might follow this. But for the time being, the virus has changed to a point where, yes, it's still, more so infectious, but less so in terms of the harm that it causes. So we all know that we're going to inevitably move to a mask recommended or a mask optional society overall. So the point becomes, when to do it. And obviously we don't want any sort of decisions that are driven by ideology. We want to make decisions based on the realities around us. And I think the realities around us show that we have increased ability to protect our most vulnerable individuals. Masking is available for those who need or want it. We can certainly accommodate those people through other surrounding them in the right environment within school. We make accommodations for all sorts of issues. We can certainly continue on that path. And the wide availability for vaccines for most of our students, not all, the 0 through 5 is coming, or 1 through 5, but the vast majority are. Our teachers are well vaccinated, and as is our community overall. So, this just seems like it's the right time to go. And in terms of, setting a date for that, because we can't set a metric, we can't tie it to anything that might happen other than a preponderance of of what's around us. I'd like to see us take a week in that time period, come up with ways to protect our most vulnerable, give people a little time to get used to the idea, and then, we go forward. And if that doesn't work, we will reevaluate. If the disease changes, we reevaluate. That's our authority as board. So that's my point.
Thank you, Mr. Heggie. I see Ms. Czechtorowicz, would you like to weigh in?
Yes, I would. I'm going to take my hand down for a second before I say anything. In fact, my comments, I might have more later on. I guess I have some reactions to what was just said. I'm just going to say that we really don't have the clear legal standing until, I guess, Thursday. I just want to point that out. But I think the legal issue is one thing, the health issue, and I think that's another aspect. It's not just a legal issue. And we've heard from so many people on both sides of this. And I guess if one thing we have in common is I think we're all pretty stressed about this issue. It's not easy for anybody. And we should acknowledge that this is hard work, any way you look at this. I am very concerned about our medically fragile, our students, our parents, extended family, and teachers. We heard that in comments today. We've heard it in emails. I urge people to consider how complex it is for a family with a medically fragile student or parent. It is not a matter of, let's figure out where they can sit in the room to make them safe. They must consult with their personal physicians, sometimes several specialists, not just one or two. They have to consult with our administrators, with our teachers. There needs to be a plan. Oftentimes IEPs, which are legally binding, have to be amended. This takes a significant amount of time. And there are legal obligations that this district has to those students. 1 week, I propose, is not sufficient time for that. It is not sufficient time for the community to adjust to a radically different classroom setting than what we have been doing before. And I guess I didn't really want to lead with a date, but since it was thrown out there, I really feel it's a little bit of putting the cart before the horse, because we haven't had a discussion about all the other issues and possible parameters, but I just had to speak up about setting a date, being conscious of setting a date that does not give families who have medically fragile kids to react. And again, those situations are often extremely complicated. And again, I have to point out there are legal issues involved with those children who have IEPs, and I know I'm going to have more comments later, but I really wanted to say that first. I'm going to let some other board members talk. I know there are other things people want to bring up, and I think we also have to be discussing some parameters that we might want to put in place, no matter what the time frame we're talking about is. I know somebody mentioned the February 28th date. That seems to be the day that adults will be able to take off masks in public. At a bare minimum, I think we should consider that. All right, I'm going to let somebody else talk for a while.
Thank you. Thanks, Natalie. I appreciate those good comments. Diane, did you want to speak?
Yes. So I've been thinking about this for a while, as I'm sure all the board members have. We are likely all extremely encouraged to hear recently that there's many reliable sources that are saying we are likely past the worst of the COVID pandemic. To our parents, students, teachers, staff, and community, I just wanted to extend a thank you for all of your efforts up until now for caring about your larger community. COVID presents us with an evolving situation that can change daily, and none of us have a crystal ball. I don't think any of us can predict what's going to happen next week or even tomorrow at this point. That being said, there are many reasons for all of us to feel a sense of optimism, and this optimism has brought us here today, where we're considering a school mask optional policy and how that may look in the future. Public health mitigations and the timing of the implementation and removing of such mitigations in schools are typically decisions reserved for public health experts, epidemiologists, and physicians with expertise in infectious disease and pediatrics. As a board for the past 2 years, we have ourselves looked for guidance from these experts in public health departments. Our board is not a public health department, nor are we qualified to operate as one. Masks are but one layer of mitigation in our battle with COVID. There is every reason to believe that if the metrics continue to improve, public health departments will be changing their recommendations concerning masks, even within group or congregate settings such as schools within coming weeks. None of the local health departments that I am aware of, however, have yet changed their current recommendations on masking within schools. When it comes to public health, we need to be cognizant of guidance from these local public health departments, as we have been throughout the pandemic, as well as guidance from the American Academy of Pediatrics, Illinois Department of Public Health, ISB, and CDC. Right now, that guidance is quite consistent, and I would suggest we continue to follow the advice of public health experts. In addition, as we enter the month of March in Glenview, we will be seeing warmer weather, which hopefully will allow additional mitigation measures to come into play, additional time spent outside, and perhaps more time for students in fresh air. Approximately 57.4% of students in District 34 are currently believed to be vaccinated, and this is a good start, but a better vaccination rate would provide a safer environment in which to remove a mitigation measure. I would ideally like to see us provide families that may have been on the fence or simply ambivalent about vaccinating their children more time to utilize this mitigation. I will let other people speak before I say any more. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane. Can you take your hand down? Because it kind of freezes my screen up. Sorry.
Sorry.
That's all right. Is anyone else would like to speak? Mr. Jim Baumstark, thank you.
So first, to me, the decision of mask optional, I think some of the sentiment here is that it's a matter of when, not if. And no one knows the time frame, but that time frame of when kind of feels like it's measured in weeks and not months in most scenarios. So like that's one framework I think about in terms of the consequence and impact of a decision we make. It's not a decision of, it's not like a permanent, it's not whether to or not for forever. It's like, do you do it now or do you do it in some time frame that feels like weeks? And so the marginal impact there is maybe not as big as we might think, because there's not maybe a ton of difference in that time frame. So I just wanted to kind of give that perspective in terms of how I kind of view it. So what I did here is to me there's lots of inputs into this problem. Those of you who know me well, like I'm a math person, mathematician. So I've tried to boil this down. Like what do I feel like are the inputs into my decision? And I thought I would just share some of those, like how I'm thinking about this and what I think is important. So considerations in deciding what to do. One we've talked about is just what are the actual local, county, state, or federal laws and orders that are in place. Like that has to factor into our decision. And obviously one of them has been kind of thrown into the gray area space. And to my knowledge, there's not a local there's not a local or a county or a federal law other than on the buses that would apply to our schools. So the only one that was in play was the Illinois mandate. The second one is what is the guidance from local health authorities, which is the local ones, Cook County, Illinois Department of Public Health, and CDC. But when I think about that, I also think about like to what extent is their guidance actually tailored or being able to be fitted to our local setting. I have a little bit of a feeling like they have to have a least common denominator approach, and like the CDC needs to set a national standard, and their guidance isn't really tailored, and so that's a factor in how I think about it too. I would love to be able to rely on health authorities, but it would help me more if I felt like they had something that was a little bit more responsive than even Cook County has the city of Chicago in it, and I feel like that weighs into how we might want to have to think about interpreting that. Also, the current level, this is the more obvious metrics, the local levels of transmission, hospitalization, and death. Those currently are down dramatically from where they were just even 6 weeks ago. I think the case rates might be down 90% in our local community. And it's not only where we're at, it's also the direction they're going. So not only are we low versus then it's still going down. Severity levels, another thing I think about too, like Omicron is not Delta, like if we have a lot of the metrics that on our dashboard, for example, now we have case rates per 100,000. Those were developed and used at a point in time when the severity of the infection was higher, right? So like an Omicron case in my mind doesn't equal a Delta case or a case before that. So even though those metrics, they're getting even close to not being read anymore, but in my own mind, I kind of weight them slightly differently because 99% of all infections now are Omicron. Someone mentioned this too, like what are the local and regional metrics of community protection? Vaccination rates prior infection, like that should weigh into how transmissible we feel things are. What are the other local restrictions and mitigations in place? I feel like it's going to provide some cognitive dissonance to know that all of our children can go unmasked in every other public setting starting on February 28th, but still not in a school. So that's something I try and reconcile. I also add like the obvious ones of like, what are the educational and social emotional costs to our kids of maintaining this? Hard to measure, hard to know for sure, but we've certainly heard a lot from the community about what that's all about. And how effective are the mitigation strategies? It's when people say masks work, masks don't work, I think maybe sometimes do individual masks work versus do masking policies work? In some ways, masking policies are only as good as the compliance with them. And I work in a school. I see teenagers all day, and it's hard to have full compliance. Like so, it's hard to know whether the presence of the masks are doing what they're supposed to do when it isn't being implemented with like sort of the perfection of wearing a perfectly fitted mask at all times. Just a couple more. Thank you for humoring me here. I think another big important thing is to what extent have individual risk mitigation strategies such as personal masking and vaccinations, are they effective, and how long have they been broadly available to the community and for a sufficient period of time? And I feel like we're quite, if not there, very close to that, having those individual strategies available to people. And then another one is the ability to re-implement mitigations. Like if someone was saying, hey, the choice we might make tonight to be mask optional is a forever choice, I'll feel very differently about it than if it's something that can be changed based in response to conditions. So my assumption is we have the local control, we can change based on changing conditions. And speaking of those conditions, I think it's also important to know, like, if things were to deteriorate, how quickly could we react? Like, would a new wave just materialize and hit us tomorrow, or would we be able to see it coming and respond? My view is that we would be able to do that. So that gives me greater comfort in making a choice now because of that. And then Natalie talked about this one about just are we allowing appropriate lead time to allow individuals to plan and make appropriate adjustments to prepare for a change in mitigation? I don't know what the magic number is there, but I'd like to make sure we thought about that too. So it's not just immediate. And then also the operational impacts to schools, like just what's it going to mean on the ground for everybody in the schools, whether you do something or not do something. So anyway, that's sort of my framework of how I've been thinking about what are all the factors that go in. And you can see why this is a hard decision, right? You put all this stuff into it'd be great if you could build a model and say, give me all the inputs, and out pops a number and says, make a decision. But so these are all the things that I weigh, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much, Jim. I think everyone who's spoken has enumerated how hard a decision this is, because we don't have clear guidance that is easily digestible by everyone. This is not a decision lightly made or lightly considered. And I believe, Dr. Deli, you said that this is a decision we're making without 100% clear data, which makes it even harder. So this is something that we're going to continue to talk about. I'm going to ask, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, Mr. Corman, could you have anything to weigh in on? Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. And I would have preferred to hear from the esteemable Dr. Dolan first, but I'm happy to jump in, and hopefully you can hear me through my mask. I'm actually in a school building now. I had the opportunity yesterday to work in a second grade in a nearby school district, and those second graders, 8 years old, were essentially basically just chomping at my hips. Every time I would walk by, I was getting hugs, and they were almost all consistently masked, and they were joyful. I hear all the time about people telling me, oh, the masks are this, they're that, or whatever. As a substitute teacher a year and a half ago, I made the decision to become a substitute during this pandemic to help out nearby school districts. Obviously, I cannot sub in District 34. But my hope was that if I subbed in nearby districts, I'd be able to allow someone else to come into District 34. And being in these classrooms for nearly every grade from 1 through 8 now has been very instructive, at times very stressful. My highest priority, and I've said this since the pandemic began, is to keep our school buildings open, to be able to educate our children. It was exactly why we pushed as hard as we did to open last spring, earlier than some wanted us to, and earlier than many school districts did nearby. And if it takes a mask to keep a school building open, that was a price, in my opinion, that was the greater good. And sometimes we have to make decisions that are about the greater good. The school board members here know, and certainly Dr. Deli knows, that the school board has received an incredible amount of email on every side of this topic. I want to stress something that Dr. Deli and President Nelson mentioned. The school teachers, the social workers, the lunchroom staff, the school bus drivers, the paras, they are doing the work that we have asked them to do. I promise you, they are not paid enough to be pilloried, to be insulted. I have heard stories of teachers going home in tears. I'm very, very frustrated by the activities of some parents in the community that have tried to send their kids into our buildings, believing that maybe 4 weeks ago they were armchair epidemiologists, and now they're armchair attorneys, thinking that they can tell us what should and should not be the law. We have attorneys that we have followed and have given us legal advice. It has sometimes changed and evolved, and it is frustrating at times. But the 7 of us were elected by this community to represent your interests. And that's sometimes lost on the people that are mobbing us, for lack of a better term, on all sides of this issue. I can guarantee you that in 2019 or 2018, when I decided to run for this position, I ran because I was a construction professional, not because I'm a healthcare guy. This is not what any of us that ran in 2019 could have possibly anticipated or before that date. We, as a board and as a district, have to have and must maintain the ability to run our buildings. Several of our buildings are dealing with children that their parents have convinced them that they don't need to wear a mask. That has made teaching the other remaining children more difficult. I'm just going to call it like I see it. I can't tell you that we'll never, ever have to wear masks again. Frankly, I hope we never do. But if there's another Delta variant or another variant that's more virulent, we'll probably be back here again. And something else I want to stress, I don't know what the appellate court is going to do on Thursday, but it's entirely possible that they will overrule Judge Grishow, in which case every school district in the state might be wearing masks again. That's just reality. As hard as that would be to switch for those school districts that have gone mask optional to switch back, boy, that feels awfully painful to me. I would like to see the court case work its way through until we understand, and it may not happen in the time frame that we need it to before we have to make a decision.
Thank you. Oh, yeah.
I'm almost done.
Yeah.
Almost done. Whatever our decision, I hope that our kids will not bully each other over a decision to wear or not to wear a mask. I hope that message is being sent home. We have 8,000 or so parents in this district, 4,500, 4,700 kids. Most of them have not given us their opinion on this. Less than 200 have, is my guess. We have to balance the needs of 8,000 parents against 200 that have written to us. So please keep that in mind. We should always strive to act legally. And that's something that President Nelson and I spoke about earlier. And the last thing I'll say is, whatever we do coming out of this, and I think that member Baumstark is right, we're talking weeks, not months. We are going to have to monitor attendance for illness. If we see a spike in a building where a bunch of children don't show up to school because they have COVID or whatever the case may be, we have to be able to implement mitigating strategies to protect the buildings, to keep them open. So I hope whatever we do, we give the administration the authority to do what they need to do to keep our buildings open. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Natalie, I see your hands up, but is it all right if I let James talk?
I was just going to say, please let James talk.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to go around the room first, and then we can figure out where we're at.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Natalie. I first want to start off by saying, thank you to the administration, teachers, the staff, and the parents who continue to support our students. I think everybody on this call, everybody on the board, every participant tonight, and even those that weren't able to participate but are watching this, we're all aligned with the goal of keeping everybody safe, healthy, and in school. I think that should go without question. This isn't about money. This isn't about anything other than trying to do what's best for our students. In preparing for tonight, I spent a considerable amount of time reflecting on what we know, what we've learned, especially in the last 2 years, and what we don't know as it relates to our responsibility as school board members. Public health experts describe the need for layers of mitigation. Our conversation right now is focused on one of those multiple layers of mitigation, masks. And yet we are missing the forest for the trees, in that we're not talking about the totality of everything that we can do to mitigate and enable our schools and effectively maintain the school and the classroom as a safe setting for parents, for teachers, for students, for staff. Individually, risk is decreased by vaccination. And that's the #1 health prevention strategy to end this pandemic. It's not about masking. It's not about socially distancing. It's actually about participating in vaccines. Our vaccination numbers are nowhere close to the other recommended pediatric vaccines that are schedule, including measles, mumps, and rubella. 57% within our school district is not good enough. As a public health expert and student of past pandemics, that is not going to be how we get out of this. That's not how smallpox was eradicated. That's not how we effectively managed measles and polio. It takes time and it takes commitment. That said, this is not about child abuse either. And this is about a collective trust within our community to be able to work both managing our individual risk by doing the things that we need to do, getting vaccinated, potentially, keeping ourselves away from others if we don't feel well or if we've been exposed, or at least testing to know what is our status so that we don't unintentionally affect others. There are societies that have brought those principles into practice and have done so for decades. If anybody's traveled to Japan or other Asian countries during seasons of respiratory viral transmission, wearing a mask is not offensive. It is not a judgment. It is effectively respect that you're trying to show your care for others. And I'm remiss in saying that we have not once kind of brought that to the conversation to our children to understand here's how and why we do the things that we do. It is not about us, it's about you. We don't test enough. If we're going to be taking one thing away, we need to do more of other things. And effectively, this all comes in with balance. Everything has to come together, else it all falls apart. And this is really the crux of the challenge here. And whether it's you want to talk about how this is layers of Swiss cheese, where each solution by itself is imperfect, but the imperfections are covered up by the other complementary solutions. That is what it's going to take. And if we are truly going to go forward and do one thing, it is going to have to come at the commitment and the achievements of others. If we, and I think we, and again, I'm not when, it's certainly going to be a when we get there. We're not there yet. And if you look at the data, the projections from the CDC for Illinois, and also if you look at and extrapolate those epidemiologically to our counties, cases are declining and will be roughly 30% of what they are today in 2 weeks. Now, the Omicron spike is a very bizarre scenario. It's highly infectious and it's not to be underestimated. More cases of COVID happened in the last 6 weeks than happened in the entire calendar year of 2021. And I'm hopeful that we can not use data to try to create a story and narrative, but to remind everybody that we are not able to look back yet and say that we're out. We can have a light at the end of the tunnel. We can set expectation. We can get there, but we have not emerged into the light yet. School boards are not public health experts. They frankly, they're not at the table. And if the ask from the community is that we now start practicing public health policy, that is something different. It changes the expectation, and it should also change the timeline by which we operate as a school board to meet the needs of the community. We have a lot of individuals within our community who also don't have a voice. And for that, I think we need to acknowledge that we do have a diversity within our community. We have a tremendous amount of access, and we are raising our children to be global citizens. And we need to take that accountability and take that responsibility, not just with the pandemic, but with everything in terms of mutual respect and commitment. I personally look forward to the day when we can safely as a community look each other in the eye, see the smiling faces of children without any sort of obstruction. But we're not there yet. We have a responsibility to maintain a consistent approach, leave public health policy and guidance to public health agencies. We don't have the data, we don't have the qualifications, nor the expertise if the request is to do it today. If the request is we are going to now own that responsibility and be accountable to it, then it's going to take time. And I think a 2-week window, as Natalie suggested earlier, is enough to at least say, these are the 3 things that we're going to target. And everybody has to participate. That is the community. Maryland today, as an example, set forth that masks are going to be optional if and in communities where vaccinations for the entire community are at 80%. And community transmission is at low or at medium as defined by and tracked by CDC. If we want to go to that, we can adopt a measure that somebody else has taken. That is not something that I think we should do as a school board because of the unknowns. But if we want to commit and say we can do those things and set the timeline to be consistent with other state elements within the state, then we can do that. And I'm just going to close with this. Leadership at times is difficult. You know, I want to acknowledge all of you for your steadfastness, your commitment to the students and to our community in the last 2 years. It takes courage, it takes grit, and that's the example all of our students deserve. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dolan. It's great perspective, and it brings us, you know, I have a few things that I want to say. Is that first? All right, now. I'm hearing from everyone at this point that the idea of changing to a mask optional recommendation, I'm sorry, mask recommended but optional idea is a possibility right now. What we're talking about now is where and when we want to do this. I think that's where the group needs to get some more consensus. I feel like we're a little all over the map at this point on that, but I would like to point out that even if we did move to a mask recommended but optional policy, there are a couple things that I think we need to do as a board to help the administration manage this. And one of that is that we would have to definitely make sure that everyone understands it would still be mandatory on buses, that it's federally regulated. Number two, that any students that are, if they were test positive for COVID and they're returning from an exclusion because of a positive test, I think that they will always have to wear the mask for the next 5 days, because that's still recommended by the CDC, because they're still could be transmittable. There's another thing, we still have this legal TRO lawsuit out there. And as Mr. Corman mentioned, you know, we have always followed the law. And right now it's a little gray as to what the actual law is. But on Thursday, if the TRO is stayed or reversed by the High Court, that we actually follow whatever that the laws that are lawfully in place at the time that we can ascertain from our attorneys, because as we hear, there are now 3 branches of government involved with this. So it's actually, it's a little murky, once again, coming from Springfield, who's in charge and who's making the rules. So those are just a few of the things that I want to talk about. And Natalie's had her hand up for a while. I'm gonna let her talk. Everyone's gonna get some more time to talk because we need to talk about it.
Yeah, and actually, I'm going to take us a little back. I'm sorry, Scott. I really appreciated Dr. Dolan's comments, and they're a reflection of this sort of balancing that we are all trying to do and all the factors that we are weighing in that balance. And Mr. Baumstark also did a really great job of saying what the things he was balancing. And I just feel the need to say a little bit more about our staff and why I believe we need more time as well for staff. They have pivoted and adjusted and you know, we've talked about it, but they have been trying to figure this out at the grassroots level. And we need to give them time to figure out this next transition, however long this transition, you know, is going to take to where we get to the rollout of it. They need to figure out how they're going to manage their classrooms. We did hear that tonight, but it's real, and they're professionals. They're part of our school community as well. They're not just workers, they're professionals, and we need to honor their professional environment. And so again, that's another factor that I'm considering that I just wanted to make that clear. Another thing I really feel that I need to say, that there is not a single board member that is not deeply concerned about the social emotional welfare of our kids. Whatever our conversation is tonight, wherever we land, we are not oblivious. We are to the tremendous stress that our students are under. That is definitely factoring in to all our decisions, always. I know a lot of parents are very concerned about it. We are too. We're parents too, and we worry about our kids too. So I feel the need to say that because I don't want anybody to misinterpret what I'm saying about we need time as I'm not considering that aspect. I am considering that aspect. And I dearly hope that we do not transfer our angst with this onto our children. So that's it. I probably will have more to say to come, but for now, that's it. Thank you.
John, you got your hand up?
I do. Pull it down. There we go. Yeah, and Natalie, I think that's a great point that you make. Sometimes we get in here and we have these conversations and, we know the baseline of each other. And that is, of course, caring deeply about the social and emotional well-being of all of our students, as well as the education, as well as 25 other things that we don't sit and list because that's why we all got into this. But, well worth pointing out, I agree. Just on the win aspect of this, I guess what's sticking with me is, all the various things that people have mentioned that we need to do and need to be cared for. That's not going to stop. And I think saying that, hey, we can get all that done in any amount of time is wishful thinking at best. So it feels like picking a date is a little arbitrary to me. But at the same token, I want to give individuals, as Dr. Dolan was talking about, the individual action that people can take, a little time to get that K95 mask if that's what they want to do, a little time to adjust to it. And I'm sticking with my thought of a week versus 2. I mean, because that's a short week, so you're only talking about a few more days. I don't think we get finished with all the things that need to do. And I would implore the administration, continue to reach out to the voiceless, continue to protect our most vulnerable, and always pivoting and adjusting. I mean, we're not going to change. We're not going to ever be in a situation where we don't have to change. Our situation is change. So I don't think we can walk away in 2 weeks and say, whew, done, it's great. But I don't think 2 weeks is a magic number. And I don't think there's any point in pushing this any further, than a week. I just don't see what we pick up in that.
Well, we pick up the time for us as a district to fulfill our legal obligations to our students with IEPs. And that's a real thing. And
do you think you can get that done in 2 weeks?
It's a very complicated process to change IEPs, address all these needs. These kids, medically fragile people, generally have more than one issue going on, sometimes one big issue going on. There are frequently several different types of specialists involved in their care. A parent needs to consult with each one of those specialists. Sometimes those specialists needs to talk to themselves, consult with our district, consult with teachers, social workers. Our school nurses, by the way, also need to be involved in that conversation. Those conversations are detailed and lengthy. 4 extra days really isn't asking for all that much. I mean, if as I'm talking about it, I'm thinking maybe 2 weeks isn't even enough when I start enumerating all the things that need to get done to provide for the safety of these kids who really, I have to also say that those kids are not saying, I have a choice to wear a mask or not. Those kids don't have a choice. They have to, right? Unfortunately, that's their reality of their world. And if we're going to say that 4 days won't give you any extra time, well, then I'm willing to go 3 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever time it takes to help them get to where they need to be.
Thanks, Natalie. Diane has her hand up. I'm going to let Diane weigh in a little.
I would agree with Natalie. I mean, we have a legal obligation. It's not just a matter of whether or not we want to. I mean, the Americans with Disabilities Act, I mean, we have to allow these children to get everything set. And we need to allow the families the time. We need to allow the teachers to work with them. Also, too, I mean, something that was mentioned is that the teachers need time to develop classroom policies. They need time to adapt. And, they're not going to be able to do that in a second. They're going to need a little bit of time. So, I mean, we need to allow them the time to do that and the grace to do that because they are professionals. I think they deserve that from us as working professionals. So I would want to allow the teachers. In addition to that, I mean, something I didn't address earlier is, there may be some teachers that for one reason or another did not decide to get vaccinated. I know it's a very small portion of our population, but I would like to see those teachers have a chance to also, because they might have been on the fence because of a medical condition that we don't understand, talk to their doctors and decide whether or not to get immunized. Just additional things I think we need to give people time to adapt. Thank you.
I just like to weigh in that I think that we all agree that we want to give time. We're talking about how much time that we need. John has mentioned
more than a week.
John is comfortable with a week. Diane wants more than a week. Natalie wants more than a week. I'm ready to lean into a week if we have to. I'm just throwing that out there right now. But clearly, if I could lean into a week, I could lean into 2 weeks. So I just want to put out there that as a community, we're greater than 90% first dose vaccinated. Glenview is 75.8% fully vaccinated. Our staff is 97% vaccinated. I'm struggling as a person right now because we haven't had a stated goal from the governor until recently that he's looking at hospitalizations. Those numbers are coming down. They're plummeting. We're projecting the numbers based on the numbers right now. In 1 week, those numbers are going to be dramatically lower at this point. In 2 weeks, they're also going to be much lower. It's amazing how much they're plummeting. We're going to do what we can do as a board. That's the best, worst decision that we have to make right now. So does anybody else have any thoughts? We're honing in on some ideas here.
Can I know
Sure
I'm talking a
Natalie.
lot.
Yeah.
Those of you who know me know I tend to talk a lot, so this is not out of character for me. Trying to encapsulate my thoughts right now. I think, Scott, that we do have to be cognizant of what's going on in our community in terms of those numbers. And I don't suggest that we don't keep, I think we do need to keep that on our radar. That is why I feel comfortable having this conversation in the first place, is because our numbers, our dashboard numbers are low. I will admit. And so that's why we should have this conversation, along with among many other reasons. I will say that I feel like we're getting some sort of signals from people from public health officials that it is coming, it's imminent, it's around the corner. As Jim and I think Dr. Dolan also said, it's weeks rather than months. I feel like in 2 weeks, at a minimum, the mandate is being lifted for indoor mask wearing. It would make sense to me that would be the day that we also align with that. I assume that is not an arbitrary number picked out of somewhere that wasn't vetted through public health officials who for some reason don't really want to come out and say, our Illinois and our local public health officials are very reticent to commit to a day for schools. I did also happen to, and maybe other people did too, hear what Dr. Arwady said, who's with the Cook County Department of Public Health. It's fairly well known at this point, talking about how we're going in the right direction. We're close, we're not there yet. And Dr. Dolan also said, we're not there yet. I feel like 2 weeks gives the numbers a chance to go even lower, gives everybody breathing room to get more comfortable with this. I I respectfully propose that we adopt the 2-week date, this February 28th date of to go to mask optional. Since this is the road we are going on because of the numbers, at least give families a chance to adjust to it, particularly the medically fragile. I think that's going to be it for a while for me.
Jim?
Just on the question of when to, I feel like just regardless of what the date is, the fact that there's some certainty to it is a big aspect of it as well, right? Versus having a date that's like when the guidance changes by these 3 different, like, it's hard to know exactly what that, and it could be honestly, it could be months. And so that's, I guess I'm in favor of certainty versus an uncertain date that we're tying to. Second, I wanted to come back to the idea about in person, as being really important, the ability to stay in person. I mean, the case rates 4 weeks ago were in our schools 5 to 10 times higher than they are right now. And so I guess my point is, I'm a little less concerned about some big spike creating the need to have to close the school. Even if there were some sort of uptick, it feels like hard to imagine that it would be at the levels of 4 weeks ago where we did stay open and manage through it. So.
Okay, Diane has her hand up. I want everyone to understand that we're not talking about on or an off switch we're talking about mask recommended but optional. That doesn't mean all students will have masks off. That doesn't mean all students will have masks on. I think it's hard for us to understand the risk concept with that. That's just another metric that I keep in my head. Diane?
So I agree with what was said about, I mean, I think every signal from our public health officials, and also to the fact that we have some other things going on, lead me to conclude that in all likelihood, we are going to be seeing it come to an end anyway. So, I mean, we're on that course. Personally, if I had my druthers, because I'm not an expert and I don't think this board put themselves onto the board to make public health decisions, I really don't think we did. I would allow us to just follow the departments of public health as we have during this entire pandemic. It's also consistent with what we've done. However, I understand this board wants to act on this. And there's good reasons to conclude that we're going to be doing that soon anyway. So this would give everyone a chance to plan. My thought is I'm wondering what's going to happen when masks come off in Illinois on, February 28th? I'm wondering. I mean, it could be things go very well. It could be a week. And we also don't know what it's going to look like in 2 weeks. I do agree that I think that it's going to look better. If I had to guess, it's going to look better. But we don't know, again, right? None of us, we've all thought things during this pandemic that haven't come true. So I hope that it's better in 2 weeks, but it could not be. And I think we also are making our prediction and policy based upon conditions, right? We're not saying no matter what. We're saying based upon conditions if they continue to improve, right? So with all of that being said, I would be comfortable with coming to a date certain. I kind of would like to see a date, give us that buffer to see what are things going to look like a week after all the masks come off in Illinois. Is it going to go up? Is it going to go way up? I don't know. It probably will not go up a lot is what I'm thinking. And if that, in that case, I would like to see a week after the February 28th date. That being said, I think we're talking about it being pretty inevitable in that time period. I think it's going to happen. I mean, I think it's going to come down. So I would say that we could set it either whatever comes sooner. That would be another way to draft it, to say whichever comes sooner, whether it be a date certain or, by ruling of, or we can set a metric even. That would be another way to do it. Just a different option, but my druthers would be to follow what we've been doing all along. But I'm more comfortable if we could say that to say that we gave ourselves a buffer after the state takes them off. Just a thought.
Okay, does anybody else have anything? We're really kind of all over the place right now. Sorry, Mike.
Yeah, so just a couple of very brief points. One, from a logistics perspective, what we're talking about, and I'm presuming we're going to have a snow day because it looks like we're going to get a snowpocalypse on Thursday or Friday. We're talking about tomorrow, one more day this week. We don't have school Monday. We're talking 4 more school days next week. With that knowledge in hand, I'd like to ask Dr. Deli to weigh in on kind of that IEP component, the ADA component that Natalie has brought up and Diana have brought up. So we better understand not so much the risks as well as making sure the nurses are prepared who have been doing yeoman's work for our schools for 2 years. I think we owe it to them to possibly give them the time. So I'd like to get some perspective on that from Dr. Deli or from Mr. Dorkin or even Mr. Silverman, Dr. Silverman.
Thank you. So yeah, there are obviously implications behind setting the date. So, and we've talked about what I would call the major categories. There are certainly educational considerations that have to be made and adjustments that have to be made. We do have over 80 children in our school district who are on IEPs. I would not be able to recite for you how many of those have specific medical related components of their IEPs, but I imagine it's a pretty high number. And so that is something that will take some time. You know, how much time, you know, we've become very used to getting work done in shorter periods of time than we would have ever imagined. It doesn't make it ideal. There's also educational planning, and this has been touched on by others, but teachers do need an opportunity to, and we stand ready to help them in actually formulating some lessons, SEL related lessons that really get at this notion of a new social environment, because things will literally look different for them. And it's, while it's not a bad thing, we've been living a different existence for some time. And so there's that educational, social, emotional learning component to this. There's a classroom management component to this that will need to be relearned because the norms, you know, have changed. And so those are all real challenges that our teachers and support staff and administrators need an opportunity to shift with, as well as has been cited, parents and others at home. Then there's the operational aspects of making a shift like this. So, you know, the point for us getting together here is talking about updating a mitigation plan. So that is some work that would have to be done. That's not time consuming work with the right parameters, but that's work that has to be done. And, you know, there are other management and organizational decisions that'll have to be made, partially related to any updates in the mitigation plan that we'll need to be able to talk through as a leadership team and prepare for. So, you know, I don't know if this helps you in terms of your time frame, but, you know, 1 week would be a bare minimum. 2 weeks would be, I think, more doable, and that largely rests with some of the special education work that would be done, but something in between a week and 2 weeks would actually work also. So I don't know if that helps frame this or if that's what you were going after, but that would be my input on that.
Can I just interrupt?
Diane's had her hand up. I did want to.
Well, Diane, would you mind?
I'm sorry, I forgot to take it down, Scott. I apologize
Oh,
again.
then okay,
I forget
Natalie,
to
go
take my
ahead.
fake hand down. I apologize.
So just while I don't mean to step on Dr. Deli's toes, but I really feel we need to ask Mary Garrity about IEPs and medically fragile students. If you don't mind, Mary, I don't mean to impose on you. You had no idea I was going to call on you to talk about this, but if you could take a few moments to so that we can hear what all that entails for those students.
Well, so Dr. Deli is right. There are over 80 students in the district that have IEPs with medical alerts. And about 2/3 of those students have conditions that are related to COVID conditions, such as diabetes, asthma, and other more serious issues, heart conditions, things such as that nature. As you know, Natalie, IEPs are individual decisions that need to be made individually, as you stated, in terms of looking at each individual's child's needs and then trying to determine what needs to be done. When we look at what are our mitigation factors that are left, once we remove masks and we remove that piece, that's what we need to start balancing in terms of what can we put in place to ensure that those students remain healthy and safe. And as Dr. Dolan said, looking at those vaccination rates of the children that are in that classroom. I know that some other school districts have asked the parents of the children in those classrooms, can you please have your child mask in this classroom because there is a child with a serious health condition. So it is complicated. It isn't a simple answer because all of their conditions are very different. And so it's sort of weeding through what each of the individual needs are and determining which children will need different mitigations and will need different strategies put in place at this point. So I don't know that I clarified it any further, but it's difficult, just to answer that without the team of people that typically work with our students.
That's very helpful information, Mary. Thank you so much. And I sort of don't want to belabor this point, but
can I just bring it into perspective a little though? I mean, also, did you have to do this when we moved to a remote situation in the beginning of the pandemic also? Is there some idea that you had,
and they had a lot of time to do it though.
They did? I
Wow.
remember going remote on March 17th,
Right.
I believe, and not really announcing it.
We did go remote, but at that point, remember, we thought things were going to last only a few weeks. And yes, Kristen Caceres and I, along with all of our assistant principals, pretty much worked around the clock during that time in terms of putting in place remote learning plans and working with our teams to determine how FAPE, which is free appropriate public education, would be managed in a remote setting. So we attended many webinars that were held nationally. So we had to learn lots very quickly, true, but we did have, at least 2 or 3 weeks during that time when we were on that emergency order of remote, if you remember that.
Thanks, Mary. That's helpful because I believe I heard the quote that it's as hard coming out of a pandemic as it is going into it.
How many of us have done that in our lifetime, Scott?
Yeah.
Don't say one. I
James,
have a couple questions really quickly, Scott, if I may. So if we're going to talk about one thing, I think we have to talk about all the things, right? And so, and all the things includes vaccines. I mentioned it earlier in my opening comments. And do we have any need to help support any of our community in terms of access to vaccine? Do we need to, kind of either re-engage IDPH or a clinical partner to support any of our K-8 students with vaccine access? That's kind of first question. Second is, if we go to mask optional, do we have the inventory, the capacity to help support those families who maybe don't or would prefer to have a more effective mask, a KN95 mask that fits a pediatric face, as opposed to a surgical mask or a cloth mask, and move away from double masking into something that it actually has been shown to be effective? Those are two questions where I have, again, it comes down to, if it's going to be optional for some, can we instill confidence in the others that are going to be taking a different approach to managing their own individual risk? Because this has to be a context of balancing individual risk with the trust of the community and awareness of the community. One thing can't happen without the others.
Yeah, I can respond briefly to that. To the extent that we determine that we need to be doing more outreach with vaccination clinics, we can certainly partner up and do that. We have been under the impression that and as you know, we put a substantial push on that and had multiple relationships with different agencies at one point in time to really make that advancement. And I think we've done a good job. It, of course, winds up being a personal choice, but to the extent that this becomes an availability issue or that there's some access that's proving to be a hurdle, we would be happy to orchestrate other opportunities for vaccine clinics. I haven't heard information that people are having a difficult time with that, but we would certainly be responsive to that. With respect to the KN95s, we have been supplying and will continue to supply masks to our staff members. We can broaden that outreach and have some level of availability to students as well. I should probably know, but I don't recall off the top of my head the shelf life of a KN95. So depending on the frequency and number that we would need, we'd have to dig a little bit deeper into understanding the kind of supply that we would need. But again, certainly doable.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything they want to bring up right now? I mean, this has been very extensive. I feel like we've landed on a point that mask recommended but optional is something we want to do. There does seem to be some consensus of having a firm date versus relying on an unknown mitigation number that we aren't sure is out there right now. I'm hearing that the people are comfortable. They would like to have this happen like between the 22nd and the 28th. Am I correct? Other than somebody else, I see you. I see you. I see you, Diane. I'm just want to talk for a minute. There are some people that are between the 22nd date or the 28th. And we could even go in between there and say the 24th if we had to, but those are dates that have been put out there. And Diane, I'm going to let you talk right now because I know you're not on any of those.
No, I actually would just, I mean, again, to be clear, my position is only consensus driven at this point, because that's kind of what we do as a board. My druthers would be to wait for guidance from public health experts as we've been doing throughout the pandemic. That being said, because we do work towards consensus, I would be more comfortable with the 2-week date, much more so than the 1-week date. And honestly, I still would ask that we'd give us a week after the 28th, because I think we could see a little spike. It might be minor, we might not see any spike, but what I hate to be doing is going back to masking constantly. If we could avoid that by giving ourselves a little bit better cushion, a little bit better planning to have the schools more ready, I think that's better than having to tell everyone we need to go back to masks. That's just me. Thank you.
Yeah, I do also want to reserve the right, depending on, like, right now we're in the Omicron variant. If there is another reason that we need to change our mitigation strategy as we go based on how the pandemic's reacting, that needs to be in that idea. And that would be something that the superintendent would be directed to update our mitigation plan to be consistent with something like that. There's any other input that I threw out those dates? Is anybody else? I mean, I'm Mr. John Heggie. You've been pretty clear on where you're landing. I'd like to hear from Natalie. I think I know you're the 28th. I want to.
I'll be the 28th or a week after.
Longer. I got that. Or I just want to hear from some of the other guys. Jim, maybe.
I think where I would land, my preference, I think, would be the 28th. I think aligning it with the rest of the state feels like it makes some sense. Plus, it gives that lead time for the schools and or for the teachers to be ready. And I also want to maybe throw the idea of, do we need to have at least formally some condition, right? We keep saying we're assuming it's going to be better, but do we at least want to have something that we put in place that's it's the 28th and whatever we want to see. Something got better. I don't know. It's hard to talk about. It's better than the first half of February. You want it to be not just random data fluctuation either, though, right? So I don't know if it's like the weekly average in that week versus 2 weeks ago or something, but just something that we're committed to this idea that we're doing it because we believe it's going to get better, and then hold ourselves accountable that it actually does.
If metrics continue to improve, like language like that.
Yeah, and yes, but I think we need to be a little bit more specific. That could be
suggestions.
Yeah.
I'm not comfortable with that. I think that pins us, and we're putting a date on something, and it's still contingent, and so it's not a certainty, Jim. And as you pointed out, there's something to be said about being specific about this. Now, I do want to point out that if our COVID mitigation plan that we're asking him to look into, if there's a reason that he doesn't feel, the administration doesn't feel we should move, they'll let us know. I mean, I think we need to land on a date here. This is it's too hard to. All we're doing is introducing more uncertainty.
I like Jim's suggestion.
That's good. That's fine.
I kind of feel like we could say, as case numbers continue to drop. I fully expect
that leaves it interpreted by who?
Well, we have numbers. We have a dashboard.
We have hospitalizations to look at.
Yeah, we can pick
Right,
any.
but I think our dashboard is going to be mostly green by tomorrow.
I hope you're right.
Me too.
That could be the condition. The dashboard's green.
Well, what part? There's 9 squares in a dashboard. Which ones are you focused on?
I think there's a couple that are red. So I mean, we want to get more of them to not red.
I can pull it up. I'm pulling it up right now.
I mean, that cases per 100,000 is going to probably be red for a little bit, but I also think that Omicron, what I talked about earlier, like I feel like 100 cases today is not the same as 100 cases when it was Delta.
Right.
In terms of.
I think tomorrow we could have 9 green boxes 9 out of the 12 boxes.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
There's no question. The cases per 100,000, I don't think that's a metric to be used anymore. It's very strong because its correlation to hospitalization is not as evident with Omicron right now. I know, James, I understand your high numbers do lead to hospitalization. I get it. But with Omicron, it has to be much higher numbers even too.
Yeah, I'm only gonna add one thing. I don't think a single day is what we have to look at. I think it has to be consecutive days if we're going to be looking at dashboard colors, right? So if you can consistently stay, then that's great. And it's not a single point variance, which is great across.
Our dashboard's updated once a week.
And they're 7-day averages, I believe.
Yeah, our dashboard's updated once a week, and it's a 7-day average. So
I don't think that, and so I'm saying, what I'm suggesting is that if we go to that,
it's a bad metric.
It's perhaps going to be one of those things with the lagging indicator. If you only look at it once, you're going to have 7 days delayed information. So if we're going to get to the point of having something that's flexible, it's going to need to be updated more regularly, and we'd have to go to a different data source.
Right. So I think our COVID dashboard is not a metric for us to use because it's too static. It doesn't move quick enough based on how the numbers are crashing right now.
So if I might, a couple points. One, I think I've personally landed on the 28th for the reasons that we've mainly discussed.
Did Mike disappear?
We lost Mike.
He's coming back.
Here he is.
I'm
Sorry, you
back.
got lost.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I got lost somewhere. I'm not sure how that happened. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. I think I counted 7 school days to be able to get the medical, to be able to get the instructional. I'm aware that some school districts made snap decisions based on their interpretations of the TRO. And frankly, I can't imagine what those teachers must have felt like the next day when they were slammed with the idea that they lost control potentially of their classrooms. And I think that we need to be able to maintain order and discipline in our classrooms. I would really respectfully ask the parents that are sending their kids into our buildings unmasked to please give us the grace to get through to the 28th so that we can get the masks off everyone in our buildings that want to be unmasked. I believe we'll still have a high percentage of students that will choose, or their parents will choose, to be masked. And I hear over and over again from those parents that want mask optional, that that's what they want. So I'm going to take them at their word that they mean mask optional. And I guess if you're looking for direction from me, Scott, I would align with the 28th. It gives, I think, enough time for everyone to get their stuff together. I'm not sure putting a metric on it is necessarily helpful. I agree with you that adding ambiguity just, in my opinion, will unsettle the community to think that, well, is it really going to be the 28th? Who's going to make the decision that it's going to change? The 28th aligns us with the state. And I think directionally, that's probably the best we're going to get right now. I'll leave it at that. Thank you. And I'm happy to make a motion if that's where you're at.
You're muted, Scott.
John wants to speak, and then I will go to Dr. Deli. So John?
I can confer to Dr. Deli for the moment.
Okay, Dr. Deli?
John, you've yielded your time for the moment?
Indeed.
Why, thank you. So I would like to make an in the meantime comment, and what I mean by in the meantime, independent of what the date winds up being. And this is a sidecar to Mr. Corman's conversation, that children who are mask non-compliant in the meantime are separated in an area of the school building. They are given access to their schoolwork, and they are supervised to the extent that we can. And there is no Zooming apparatus for those children. So that practice will continue. And I think it's important that people understand how mask noncompliance functions currently and how it will continue to function until whatever the date is. Thank you.
All right, John?
Yeah, I would just continue on the point that others have made, and I know others have made the opposite. That the condition, I just don't think we can put it in. The metric that we have is based on another disease. It was 9 months ago, and I continue to think that that we should be looking at a week. And that to a degree is somewhat arbitrary as well, but for reasons previously stated.
So because I was one of the people who was saying, advocating for metrics. While I guess my instinct for that sprang from the worry that something was going to happen intervening. But I do take the point that Mike made, Mr. Corman made, about it actually just throws a lot of indecision into the community, and a lot of then more debating and unclarity about what's going to happen on the 28th. So for that reason, I would be willing to say that it makes more sense to perhaps make 28th the date, and barring some cataclysmic event, which I don't expect, I don't think anybody expects, we can proceed with that date.
So
Okay,
President,
yes.
prepared to make a motion if
Yeah,
that's.
I'm going to ask for a motion right now. I'm going to make a motion in a second that the Board of Education update its COVID mitigation plan to move to an environment that strongly recommends but does not require mask wearing in school buildings as follows. That the school district shift to a mask optional policy, but strongly recommend it. The policy for all staff, students, and visitors on February 28th.
So moved.
2022, hold on. There's more parts to it. That masks shall remain mandatory on buses and for any students returning after a 5-day exclusion due to a positive test for days 6 to 10 as recommended by the CDC. But that if the TRO is stayed or reversed, which we know is possibly happening on Thursday, by a higher court at any point, the district shall return to its prior mask mandatory plan so long as that stay or reversal remains lawfully in place. And we're not even sure that's going to maintain that will be lawfully in place. And we will also are going to direct the superintendent to update the district's COVID mitigation plan consistent with tonight's board action. And you would be able to get that to us at a following meeting, perhaps, Dr. Deli?
I'm sorry, the updated mitigation plan?
Yes.
Oh, well before your next meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll work on getting that updated and properly shared with the board and then communicated with the public.
Okay, so I'm asking for a motion. Mr.
I move
Corman,
that.
is there a second?
Second.
I can't hear you, Natalie.
Scott, I believed at one point you said February 28th, and in another point you were reading February 21st. Did I?
No, I said February 28th,
In both
2022.
places.
I wanted to
Okay.
say the year because I just don't want to have a date that has no year attached to it right now.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Just need to clarify it. And I'm sorry,
Yeah.
whoever, I think Mr. Baumstark second.
Mr. Baumgart, second. So we have a motion and a second on the table. I'm going to ask for a roll call vote on that resolution. Katie?
Corman,
Aye.
Heggie,
Aye.
Dolan. Dolan,
I will vote aye.
Jack Torowitz,
Aye.
Stefani,
No, for the reasons stated.
Baumstark,
Aye.
Nelson.
I vote aye. So the motion carries. Dr. Deli, you have some work ahead of you here for us. And thank you for everybody. That was a very robust discussion. I want to remind everyone the board speaks with one voice. We may not have all agreed right now, but we all agree that the board speaks with one voice. And I want to thank everyone for their input. It was very important tonight. And I hope the community can get some resolve on the direction that we're heading. Now we're going to move on to the rest of our agenda. So I hope everyone sticks around. We got a lot more work to do. That's great. Number 2 is our 22014 FDK resolution. Does anyone have any questions for Eric on that?
Just if I can just make a quick comment, the board has clearly made a whole series of board formal actions related to full day kindergarten planning, which is well underway and we're very excited about. ISB does require this specific resolution be passed by the board. So we ask for your consideration. Thank you.
I do have a quick question on it. What is the practical implication of the half-day students being counted as one? Like, why is this here?
Well, one of the impacts is, for instance, the evidence-based funding and the way that a full day is counted versus a half day. You know, I'm not sure, based on early indications from ISB, that it's going to change our tier status, but it may have some minor impact, for instance. Other than that, I think it's just a formal declaration that we're moving to a full day program.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask for a motion and a second for approval. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Who is second?
Peggy.
Peggy.
Aggie. And I believe we need a roll call vote for that, Katie.
Yes, we do. Stefani,
Unmute, sorry. Aye.
Corman,
Aye.
Jack Torowitz,
Aye.
Dolan.
Aye.
Baumstark,
Aye.
Peggy,
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye. Motion carries. Our next motion is the 22015 asbestos abatement phase 2 and 3. We've talked about this before. Does anybody have any questions? I will ask for a motion in a second.
I'll move that for action, please. Mike Corman.
Mike Corman.
Second, Jim Baumstark.
Jim Baumstark. All right, can we have a roll call, Katie?
Baumstark,
Aye.
Corman,
Aye.
Jack Torowitz,
Aye.
Dolan,
James?
Dolan.
Aye. Can you hear me?
Peggy,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Stefani.
Aye.
Thanks. That was good. Now we have the 22016 internal subbing memorandum of understanding. Has everybody read that? We've had that discussion too. I think I think that's a great thing for our school district. It really speaks to our teachers that they even want to be subs within our district. That's awesome. Love that. Is there any question? All right, I'm going to ask for a motion.
So
So
moved.
John Hagee, motion, and a second.
I'll second.
Natalie, second. And a roll call vote.
Jack Torowitz,
Aye.
Corman,
Aye.
Dolan,
Aye.
Baumstark,
Aye.
Peggy,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Stefani.
Aye.
Motion carries. We're moving to section G of our agenda, discussion. We're starting with staffing allocations. It's Mr. Kevin Dorkin.
Thank you. The report that the Board of Education has is the first read of our 22-23 staffing plan. So a lot of work went into that to this point, but that will certainly potentially evolve a little bit between now and the March meeting. I would just share some brief highlights of that report. Due to a variety of factors, largely driven by enrollment, but other factors as well, including some decreased numbers in our students receiving support through an IEP. We're seeing about 14 fewer full-time equivalent positions among our certified staff for next year. And similarly, we're seeing about 21 fewer full-time equivalent positions among our support staff. So the certified and support staff positions both look to decrease for 22-23. And then in the midst of analyzing our needs, we're looking to do some shifting of some of our FTE in a little bit more flexible manner. We're going to allocate 4 positions to support MTSS work, multi-tiered systems of support, through a new position we'll title MTSS specialist. Those will be at intermediate and middle school buildings. Those roles will still require the LBS 1 licensure, which is what we require for special education services, so that if our numbers were to increase either by the fall or at some point during the year, we have the flexibility to still meet needs and potential increase in our caseloads. Then we're also adding a couple of physical therapist positions to our district staff and increasing some early childhood coaching, all through some shifting in the services we get through True North. Finally, among the support staff, with our very exciting additions and construction that's currently going on, we've added a small number of support staff positions among the custodial and maintenance ranks to just maintain the increased square footage that we'll be taking on. I would be happy to entertain any questions that the board has, and we would anticipate bringing forward updated recommendation for approval at the March meeting.
Does anyone have any questions at this time for the preliminary staffing allocation?
I just want to make sure I'm reading the enrollment piece of it right. The projected enrollment drops by about 35 kids. And if I look at that chart, it's what, 40, 298 the current year down to 4263, so that's 35.
Correct.
And then you were saying that the full-time certified staff dropped how many positions?
So a little under 14, and some of that is a function of in the report that I shared in January regarding our enrollment actual relative to projected. We didn't see this school year the sort of robust return from some decreased enrollment the previous year that we anticipated. You know, a variety of factors probably played into that, Delta emerging in the summer and plans that people made that they stayed with more permanently rather than returning to us. So really looking at the 2-year decrease tells a little bit more of the story of why we're looking at fewer FTE, if that makes sense the way I explain that.
So be about 60. I was just trying to square, like, yeah, even if it's 60 students, 14 staff kind of feels like it felt like a lot of staff for only losing 60 kids. I'm just wondering why you were able to do that.
Yeah, there's some shifting. Some of it's when you look at the entire district enrollment, when you get into the math of each school and each grade level, the formulas that we apply for staffing, sometimes they just land in such a way that, you know, they're different FTE needed per building per grade. So I shared with this report just a high level summary of enrollment. That January report really gets into much more depth about, you know, where numbers are for each grade and for each.
You can get weird outcomes because you're near break points on class, eating
Precisely.
classes and things like that. So
that is a factor.
That's
And also different grades have different class sizes. Am I correct?
Correct. So rising, right. So for example, second graders rising to third, those class sizes increase. Similarly, from intermediate up to middle, those class sizes increase. So there can be shifts of that nature too.
Okay.
Thanks.
I mean, it's a good outcome. I just wanted to make sure that it's not in a way placing undue burden on teachers because you have fewer per. It's like the student to teacher ratio would be going up slightly. But that could be because of, but that's an aggregate. I understand, like at individual classes, that might not be, that wouldn't be happening.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions? All right, we look forward to is it the final report next month, Kevin?
That'll be the recommendation for 22-23 that we'd ask the board to take action on. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to phase 2 and 3 construction discussion.
Yep. So just wanted to update the board and the community based on last month's conversation that we, were able to answer questions that came from the board based on the final administrative recommendation regarding the way we're going to bid out the work that's already been put out. Addendums have been put out, and we've taken all the comments into advisement, and try to allow for as much flexibility as we could going into March when we plan on presenting contracts for award from the board. With increased in all the expenses and costs exceeding original estimates, any work that we're not able to do during this round, we still can add to the facility assessment, make it a priority, and when resources are available at a later time, we can tackle that. So I just wanted to mention that and see if there's any other comments from the board as we prepare for the awards in March.
Natalie.
If John wants to go first, he also has his hand up. That's fine. Me? Okay. So Eric and I did correspond a little about this after our last meeting. And if you give me a second, he provided me some really great answers to some of my questions. So I just wanted to kind of bring that out because we were talking about door replacements, and I understand better what is proposed to be kind of eliminated. And for the most part, it looks like these are doors that aren't really in student areas. Eric, Troy, from our architects, kind of delineated which doors might though still be in student access areas. They're not a lot. I mean, I think we're replacing most of the doors that are in student access areas to be accessible, ADA accessible. But he does mention these corridor dividing doors, which although stay open most of the time, I am worried that if those doors are closed in case of emergency, that could have a dire consequence for kids who need accessible doors. So I respectfully ask that those doors be added back into the project. And there was one other thing I wanted. Oh, and he did mention something about doors also to offices. I think particularly to principals' offices and to the school nurse's office. And while I would prefer both doors also be wheelchair accessible, because I think it's really important for a student be able to get into the principal's office, I find it essential that the door to the school nurse's office be ADA accessible. It should not add too much back into the project, but it is the very kids who need to be in contact with the nurse that need those doors to be accessible. So it seems like that would be good. And I don't know if this is the right time to bring that up, but other than that, you answered all my questions sufficiently, and I was happy with your answers, but I respectfully ask that in those two cases, we add those doors back in. That is my comment. I don't know if you have a reaction to that or if that's
I would say that we will do what we can. I know that the bids are out, addendums have been issued, and so we are kind of figuring it out at the last minute here. But if we can make those changes happen, we will.
Okay, and then if not, then I would ask that goes to the top of the list when we do our facilities assessment.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
John?
Yeah, thank you. So Eric, I guess you just said something there that confused me. When you talk about bids are out, you're talking about if the bids are out on a full scope or bids are released with the administrative recommended pullbacks.
So what we did was we issued base bids that were all inclusive to sort of cast a wide net. And then addendums with deductive alternates were issued so that we could find out if we didn't do certain things, what the cost was. And so we're trying to provide as much flexibility and options for the board with the cost overages. So it's complicated. What we do is we sort of, voice our thoughts to the architects, and they've put this together in a way that I think will provide as much flexibility as we can. And then there's obviously change orders, something like what Natalie mentioned. If there's a couple extra doors that we need to put on, I think we can do some small, design work and do it through a change order, if you will, just to get a couple more doors or doorways put in.
Well, right. Okay, so that's how we've come to the options that we have of having a rough idea on what these what taking these items off would save us. And I guess my problem with the memo you issued is to focus on things. I just think there's things we're focusing on that we can't fix later. Like just for instance, the sink thing, and I hate to just focus in on that, but we can't put that back in later. I mean, not realistically. Like, to put the plumbing in place, you got to, dig up the floor. So this is the time to do that. Finishings, which is a significant portion of these, can be put in later. Yeah, there's always some cost savings to do it in all at once, but we can't. So I don't know why we're taking things out that we're not going to be able to do later. And keeping things in that we can. And the doors are a capital improvement, not a decoration. So I think and they provide a real safety value. And then obviously there's the legal aspect and compliance as well. So I guess I would really like to see a rethink on what it is the administration thinks should stay in and what should come out, and focus on things that can't be fixed later.
So would it be helpful, John, for us to reissue that our intention list similar to what we did at the last meeting, and then accounting for the Q&A that has gone back and forth between board members and us and the architects to I guess better crystallize that. I'm just trying to figure out what would be helpful. At the end of the day, it's of course a question of how do the bids come in, and how much over are we, and are we willing to dig into fund balance, or are we willing to make some of the difficult choices about scaling back on some of the things that we originally, 2 years plus ago, thought we would be able to do. I'm just trying to figure out what would be helpful to sort of crystallize this for others.
Well, I think what's helpful is, what is it we can live with putting off? I don't think I'm ready to concede we're never going to do some of these things, but they're going to have to be done in a different order in years to come. Well, I already said how I think it should be prioritized. I'd be happy to, as a member of the subcommittee, to work with the administration on that. And I'll volunteer Mr. Corman as well. But I don't think we've got the right priority set.
So just so that I can get a little clarity, John, because I'm the one that actually questioned hard on the sinks in the classrooms, which is not really a best practice in K through 12 education anymore. Were you suggesting that was a good thing to challenge, or I'm just trying to get where you're at?
I don't want to get overly specific into the weeds on that, but that's an example of, if we think that sinks are somewhat worthwhile, and our architecture certainly thought that at one point, we should probably keep that on.
Let me answer that, John. They thought it was worthwhile because most of the classrooms had them. I challenged and said, we're going to change all of the galvanized pipe to copper and do all the other things. And I challenged pretty hard, Kevin, our team. And they came back and said, best practice, most schoolhouses, we're not putting sinks in classrooms. So I'm the one that kind of pushed pretty hard to say, if it's not a best practice for most K through 12s in the last 2 decades, why would we do it? Let's cap those lines and pull those sinks out and save that money, just as an example.
Well, Mike, I've got great concerns if we've got architects who are designing things that aren't to best practices that are 2 decades old.
Well, that's a fair question, but I think they just went with what was in place, and you could argue that probably about a lot of things, but that's a tough nut to crack, I think.
Well, I would also make the argument that it's actually hard to project where we're going to need things 20 years from now in education. As we can see, we're already making extensive modifications to a TIA, and 20 years ago, we thought we had a state-of-the-art building. So, let's not get too deep into this that way. I mean, from what I understand, John, you want to be able to have a little more flexibility to adjust projects you feel that aren't fully in your mind somewhat necessary at this time. Is that where you're getting at? That things that we can hold off on, like I'm not sure at this point, but I think I don't want to get too premature into this discussion until the bids come in and we actually know what we really have to cut. I don't want to, I'd imagine we did make a promise to the community, so the cuts do have to be strategic. I personally do not want to dip into our fund balance, and I'm imploring, the administration to find any way possible to come in within budget.
And if I may, throughout the course of the design process, you put things in there and you design not knowing what the estimation is going to reveal. And so part of this was, putting it in, designing it, estimating it, just so we can see what it looks like. Part of the recommendation is a series of cuts to try and keep us in line and on budget. And that's what our goal was. And the whole purpose of this discussion was, if there's things that you feel are important that we need to dip into fund balance for, this is an opportunity to at least talk about it. And then once the actual bids come in and we know what it looks like, then that's when we make final decisions.
Well, I got to follow up on Scott's point. And Eric, you I mean, he just kind of said the opposite. Like, there are people here who don't want to dip into the fund balance. We don't have to take a vote on who that is. But that's not the only option. We can put work off and do it at later dates, even in 10 years or 5 years. We can do that. Our only option can't be dipping into the fund balance.
No, that's not the only option. And we can forego other work and hope that we have the money later when we need it. Our operational budget is telling us a different story, as we all know, but I hear.
I get that you're saying that. I'm just saying our thought process shouldn't be on what we don't want anymore, because we wanted all this at one point. And there's reasons for it, and there's reasons we might not even understand today for it. It might be used in a different way. But I'm saying the focus should be on things that we cannot fix later, a reprioritization of what it is we're trying to do. And right, sure, bids have to come in, but the cost of finishings in particular is going to be fairly static versus the cost of, again, just we'll use the sinks as an example, of installing a sink later is going to cost way more than installing a sink now in this phase of construction. So I just would like to see it through that lens.
So I would just want to add two things. One, when we had the referendum and we built our program and our plan, the fund balance amount was part of that conversation and part of that promise. Whether we use it or not, that's a discussion for another day. But that money was part of the overall conversation. And second, and I'm just going to be candid here, I don't know how many of our board members provided feedback to the list, and I'm not trying to call anyone out, but I would like to see more feedback. I provided feedback on 3 or 4 items that we then chewed up with the subcommittee and with Mr. Miller and Dr. Deli. I'd love to get more feedback from other board members, at least to give it a once over, and if nothing else, say, it looks fine what you guys are attempting to work on.
All right, so I think we understand where we're at. Mr. Corman, when I was talking about the fund balance, I understand what we promised. I don't want to spend more than we promised. That's what I'm alluding to.
I agree with that.
Yeah. So, this will be much more clear. When did the bids come in, Eric?
But we have 4 bid openings that are happening over the course of this next week. And then they need a week to, do their due diligence. And then that's when we'll meet with the subcommittee to go over all the bids in great detail and hopefully come to the full board with a recommendation in March.
So our next meeting is March 14th. Will we have a little more clarity by then?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so let's end this discussion right now. Is everybody okay with that?
Subcommittee meets on the 8th, just for clarity.
Great. Okay, thanks. You got an idea what we're asking for, so I think that's good. All right, we're back. It's time for audience comments again. Audience comments are always welcome. Please note, the board asks that anyone addressing the board complete a form. The link is on the board agenda page and is also posted in a news item on the District 34 homepage. Comments are to be 3 minutes or less, and this participation will have a total time of 45 minutes as our first. Finally, this is an opportunity for community members to address the board, but the board does not respond during public comment section of the meetings. Kathy, do we have any comments?
We do. And Scott, you had mentioned at the end of the first participation period that we'd allow those who signed up for that period to comment this period if they wish. So I will start.
Can I ask how many comments are on your list?
Yes, total is 26. I know that not all of these people are still here.
Okay, and we're going to still limit this to 45 minutes, and people that can't comment can share their thoughts with the board via email or other methods.
Okay.
So
the first person is Anna Kowalski. So Anna, I'll bring you on.
Hello, good evening. I had to change around a little of what I was going to say as I was to speak on behalf of my children and my family for mask optional. So while it may sound that mask optional environment is to potentially happen come February 28th, and we should celebrate this win, mask optional should happen tomorrow. We have districts even tonight following the announcement from the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules switching to mask optional tomorrow. They do not have students with IEPs. How are they able to do it, but we can't figure it out? Fear has dictated the lives of so many for far too long. If you're not comfortable unmasking, fine, but you don't make decisions for my family. I'm gonna call it like I see it. So many board members have said staff needs more time. You've had 2 years to think about the end game, 2 years to unmask our children. What have we been doing in those 2 years? Enough is enough. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us and thanks for your comments.
Next is, make sure they're here, Vinnie Melito.
Hello.
Hi, we can hear you.
Hi, how are you? Hold on,
Great.
sorry. I'm sorry, I need to find my notes.
That's all right, Vinny. It's fine. Take your time.
You're going to or already have gotten a lot of speeches from parents, but I truly don't think you realize how bad the masks have gotten. In this recent lawsuit that you've completely ignored for the last 2 weeks involved over 140 districts in Illinois, and out of those districts, the very large majority of those districts who managed to figure out like what, I'm sorry, I'm choking up. The large majority of those districts got rid of their mask mandate in school. The students who have to actually wear the masks are not in very good conditions. We are not even asking you to get rid of the masks completely, just to make the masks in District 34 optional, as students have already made the point that they do not want to wear a mask in their school and is against and it is not only that, but it's also completely against the Constitution, because obviously in the First Amendment we have the freedom of choice, the freedom of religion, freedom of speech, etc. And there's been a protest at my school, and we've been protesting for mask optional, and I believe that this is something that a lot of students want, even if some may not speak up about it. And from what I've seen here in this meeting, a large majority of the parents have also seemed to want the mask optional to go through, and they wanted it to go through very quickly tomorrow, because the last speaker was right. You did have a lot of time to think about this and to go over what could possibly happen, and she's right. Enough is enough. And I'd also like to bring up a fact from the CDC. Yeah, you can see that the mortality rate of COVID is almost exactly the same of that as an unvaccinated child that has gotten the flu. So it's not as bad as people are making it out to be. The Omicron variant is not it's not as bad as Delta, and oh God, there's something else I had to say. I forgot. Jeez. Crap, what do I have to say? I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinny. Thanks for sharing your perspective and your thoughts. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm sorry you had to stay up so late.
And the next speaker, I think, knows Vinny. It's Kristen Melito.
where am I? I can't find me. Kristen, I can't. Oh, there you go. You unmuted.
Start video. Here we go. Okay. Am I ready to go?
Yeah, yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
My name is Kristen Melito, and I am a mother of 3 children in District 34, and I have lived in Glenview for 7 years. My stance is firm. Masks should be optional for all individuals immediately. Your decision to use an outdated mitigation plan from August of 2021 can only make the rest of the community assume that you are either A, passive and apathetic in forging a new plan, and or B, choosing not to adhere to the data we now have to make new decisions for the betterment of our students. In fact, after hearing you discuss a plan and timeframe this evening, I am actually shocked and flabbergasted that all of you have not been preparing for the ending of masks. It's utterly irresponsible, and I, as well as many others, feel let down. This conversation should have happened months ago. How have none of you prepared for this? Stop dragging your feet. How are other schools able to pivot in one day, and Glenview needs an exacerbated, dragged out plan? How do all other districts follow the ruling of today, but our district does not? That should have been the topic of your discussion this evening. But again, our board is about 6 months behind. With that said, tonight, rather than share my opinions as to why we should have the freedom of choice, I will touch on a few grim observations that I have seen about this district over just the past few weeks. The first is, how is it possible that our one district is so adamant on making masks mandatory when we are watching the world, our communities, and our neighborhoods around us live freely without masks? How is it possible that almost 500 districts in the state of Illinois have gone mask optional, yet here we are tonight having this discussion? I continue to ask myself, why is our district doing this? And now we know you are not prepared for this. Sadly, our community image has been fairly poor over the past few weeks, and that's before neighboring district board member Joel Taub, his vulgar tyrant in front of his peers, the board, and our students last night. Furthermore, it appears that there is something that is trying to be kept hidden. Perhaps it's a third round of ESSER funding from the state that you only receive if you continue to keep the children in masks. I'm not sure if the rest of the community is aware of that, but they should be, and now they are. So that lands me to ask, what was really your concern? Is it the funding? Is it the safety of the students and teachers? Families are grateful schools are open because they have been fooled into believing that school closures will happen if masks are optional. In fact, a mom, April, and a mom, Liz, this evening already thanked you for keeping schools open. This is simply a scare tactic. And clearly it's working because, in fact, Mr. Corman, you brought that up this evening. What an effective strategy to get families to believe you're on their side. To be honest, I wish I believed you had the teachers and the students' best interest in mind. If that were the case, I would be spending this evening enjoying my children. Rather, I am here seeking the truth from our elected officials who have no good explanations or planning for their decisions in our district. And sadly, again, they are 6 months behind. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments, and thank you for joining us.
Next is Karina Trapp.
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for letting me speak tonight. I really appreciate your time and this opportunity. But just like every other parent in this district, I'm frustrated and concerned with the direction our schools are headed in regards to COVID protocols. I attended the board meeting last August, and the school board told us their hands were tied. They were following the mandates set forth by Governor Pritzker in regards to masking the children. You said there was nothing you could do. It was out of your control. Your hands were tied. Well, a few weeks ago, a judge ruled the governor's mandates void and rightfully untied this board's hands, giving all of you the opportunity to finally give the parents of this community the opportunity to decide for themselves what would be in the best interest of their children. But rather than giving the parents that opportunity, just as over 300 other school districts in the state have done by making masks optional, you in turn tied the hands of parents who truly know what is best for their children and took it upon yourselves to make those decisions for us. And that's wrong. Regardless of what the outcome of the appeal may be, you have proven to us that your hands were never tied. You were doing exactly what you wanted to do and continue to do so. No one is saying masks should be completely removed. Families who want to have the option to have their child wear a mask should be completely allowed to do so. I support their decision to do what is best for their children 100%. The same option should be available to families who would rather not send their child to school with a mask on. It does not have to be political. It is about recognizing each child as an individual with varying degrees of needs and circumstances. It is about respecting the parents of this community and recognizing that they, not you, know what is best for their children. I hope this board will come to its senses and follow the lead of the majority of the states in this country and now over 300 school districts of the state and untie the hands of this community. Give the families the opportunity and the right to decide for themselves what is best for their children. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us and thank you for your comments.
Next is Corey Moore.
Hi, can you see me? Hi, good evening. I know it's late. My name is Corey Moore. I'm representing the concerns of students and their families with health issues and disabilities who've been listening to the discussion tonight. I first want to thank you for not having a knee-jerk reaction to removing masks tomorrow. How did all the other districts do it? Kristen Melito asked. I'll tell you, at the expense of kids with disabilities and children and staff with health impairments. Many of those families in the other districts are in absolute crisis right now. So thank you for not doing that to us. As a parent who went through the IEP process, the transition to remote ×2, it was not a short process. There were conversations with staff, with nurses, with parents, with the students themselves, with the associates. I implore the board to continue to lean into using Mary Garrity, Kristen Caceres, and the assistant principal's expertise as we make this transition. They are the experts that you've hired. Lean into them. 2 weeks is the bare minimum you've given the staff. If you are placing this on the staff, please make sure they are supported above and beyond for the next 2 weeks so they can have these conversations with families, so they can get the translators, so they can talk to the health officials and the experts that these families are going to be bringing in. Clear their schedules so they can support us, the families and the children. Do not rush the finish line at the expense of our students and staff. These are real kids with real health issues. There are teachers with health issues. They are not a number of 80 or some phone calls or paper pushing that needs to happen in the next 8 work days that the board has provided. They are a legal responsibility. You have a responsibility to provide adequate time for these accommodations. I cannot imagine how hard it has been for you. I know you are volunteers. I know many of you have worked tirelessly in this community and are being abused and threatened in a really shocking way. And I know you're tired, not just tonight, but like in general. And I know the administration is tired, and I'm grateful for your leadership. But I'll be honest, it hurt tonight to see members of this board cling to a date over the well-discussed reality of the potential harm to children with disabilities and children with and staff with health concerns. I know you want the abuse and the threats to be over. I can't even imagine. But please do not view the next 8 work days as anything less than an absolute race to avoid disaster for so many in our district that rely on your choices. I also want to say, please, please, please support the nurses, the special education teachers, and the assistant principals who have an incredibly enormous task on top of everything else they have to do in the next days. And while I'm hurt, I am grateful, and I am hopeful that this board will continue to listen and learn and do what's best for our community. Thank you, and sleep well.
Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us.
Next is Scott Steele.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry, I'm not, it's my video should be on, no? Okay,
Your
sorry.
video
Well,
is not
anyway,
on. If you
I'll just
want
go
it
ahead.
to be, I don't know.
Yeah, so I just first want to commend the board, for finally moving the ball forward and making a decision. It's been long overdue. I also want to particularly commend Mr. Hagee. He's really been the only one on the board that's been willing to engage over the past couple of years in a rational and good faith exchanges on this topic, and so I want to commend him particularly. There's been a lot of talk about the neighboring districts and counties. We have evidence right in front of our face. I pulled the last 6-month case rate from the surrounding Midwestern states, 9 Midwestern states, and the order from highest to lowest case rate for those 9 Midwestern states: Wisconsin, Indiana, Minnesota, Illinois, Iowa, Nebraska, Michigan, Missouri, Ohio. The only state out of that group of 9 that has a statewide mask mandate for schools is Illinois. So if masks are supposed to be so beneficial and effective, then why is Illinois the 4th highest case rate out of those states? What are those other states doing that we're not doing? Are we to believe that there's an Illinois COVID variant that's more deadly and dangerous than the variants in those states? It's common sense and logic. You don't need to be a doctor or a public health official to put the pieces together. I just want to quickly address some of the topics that were discussed, on the meeting tonight, between the board members. I think it was Mr. Dolan that made some comment about how vaccines will end this pandemic. I mean, with all due respect, I think 2021 called and it wants its narrative back. It's obvious now that these vaccines do not stop infection or the spread. This virus is endemic. It will be around forever. So I'm not sure why we're talking about how vaccines are going to end the pandemic, number one. Number two, there's been a lot of talk about, following the advice of the public health officials. Are these the same public health officials that said the vaccine would prevent infection and the spread, which obviously has been an epic failure? Are these the same health experts that tell you to wear a mask when you walk into a restaurant to your table, and then you're free to take it off while you talk and eat? Are these the same health experts that have implemented a vaccine mandate in Cook County a month and a half ago and now are eliminating that next week? So there's just a lot of, I hate to use the word misinformation because it's just been butchered over the last year, but there was a lot of misinformation discussed tonight, and I'd just like the board to really reflect on some of the facts and data that are out there and move forward based on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steele, for joining us, and thank you for your comments. Thank you.
Next is Margaret Rader.
Good evening. It's been a very long night. My COVID experience was what I was going to share today. I was going to say that, my daughter on December 10th spiked a fever in the middle of the night. And I did what any mother does. I kind of just dragged her in bed with me with her fever and took care of her. I tested her with an at-home test the next day, and it was negative. I did notify the school that she had a fever and she had a few symptoms, and I would keep them updated. Saturday night, the 11th, she tested positive for COVID. So my husband and my younger daughter moved to the lower level of the house, and I stayed in quarantine with my daughter. There was some inconsistencies with Springman because they made the kids that were not vaccinated, that were close contacts, leave, but the kids that were vaccinated and a close contact got to stay. That confuses me a little bit because we kind of have heard through and through, that vaccinated and unvaccinated have the same amount of virus in the nasal pharynx and can spread the virus the same. So, but anyway, so then, so after the 10 days of quarantine, no one else in my family became ill. We were testing with a PCR test every 3 days per Illinois Department of Health. I was called during that time by contact tracing, and they had it reported that both of my daughters had COVID, even though it was only my older daughter. I was told by the contact tracer that it was too late to amend that. So that day, my daughter was added in as a COVID case, who was not a COVID case. Then following on December 21st, my younger daughter spiked a fever. I was in bed with her, and they, had her tested. She was positive. I had her in bed with me for 10 days. And I never caught COVID from either of them. And in the beginning of the pandemic, they had mentioned that kids were not the super spreaders. They were not the ones carrying the higher viral loads. I've tried to go back and look at different studies and haven't been able to find anything that, anything that doesn't contradict itself. It was only after my husband got sick a few weeks later that he gave it to me. So it's not, I'm not saying I can't be. In fact, I'm just saying that it took my husband to get sick to have enough viral load for me to get sick. So I just wanted to go along with metrics that show no increase in cases with masked and unmasked schools. I agree, because I think kids really are less of a spreader, and there isn't really enough data.
Thank you for your
That's it.
comment. I appreciate it. And thanks for staying up late. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
also.
but you could see how I.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Next is Nan Ross Meredith.
Good evening again. I just wanted to come back and thank you for the really thoughtful conversation that you've had this evening. These are all really difficult conversations that we've been having for so long. And I think in a time when teachers have felt beaten up and like no one's listening and no one's paying attention, the fact that you had the type of conversation you did tonight with administration and board is really, it means a lot. And we are very grateful for that consideration, and we feel really supported. So thank you very much for the time. We appreciate it.
Thanks for your comments, and thanks for your staying up late again.
Next, we have Jen Patel.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay, thank you for letting me speak. And I know that you guys voted to go mask recommended and not required. And so I won't belabor the point of the JCAR decision today, which was a unanimous 9-0 vote to suspend IDPH's emergency rule. And I'd like to thank you for finally taking a vote on masking. Took us a while to get here, but it was refreshing to hear the thoughts of the board members, and specifically Mr. Heggie, Mr. Nelson, and Mr. Baumstark. Lastly, I'd like to just address some of the comments that Mr. Corman made about bullying and teachers losing control when plaintiff kids entered into the classrooms. I find it interesting that Mr. Corman would bring up the point about bullying when he has abused his position as a sitting board member by using intimidation tactics against parents who are lawfully entitled to constitutionally protected due process. I have reviewed many social media posts from him and emails to other people. They've sent them to me, and his tone is rude, and he is emotional, unprofessional, and he has resorted to profanity. And, I would suggest that we consider his position on this board. We know that this is not an emotional discussion. Really, this comes down to a simple issue about due process. And I'll leave it at that. The second thing about him talking about teachers losing control, I think that that's unprofessional for him to say. It's conjecture. My daughter is a plaintiff, and she went into her school, and I cannot commend Principal Puetz enough for her leadership and how she handled the situation, including my daughter's teacher, who handled it with ease and with smiles. So it's unfair for him to say that these children entered the classrooms and the teachers were unprepared and lost control. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And thank you for joining us tonight.
Next, we have Rishi Awatramani.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry, my notes are on another app. I was out. Yeah, so it seems pretty, thank you very much for the time, first of all. And sorry to keep everyone up late as well. It seems to me from this board meeting, from the parts I heard, that it's pretty clear that the board has never had a strategy on how to deal with COVID, whether it's going into the pandemic, coming out of the pandemic, anything. It seems at times you want to follow the health experts. Well, the health experts are saying the masks are face decorations, at least the ones that our kids are wearing in school. Sometimes you seem to be wanting to follow the courts, sometimes not. If we win the appellate decision, you seem to be wanting to put that into your decision tonight. But the courts already ruled that this is illegal, and we're not following that. So what are we teaching our kids over here? Do we want to follow the law? Do we not want to follow the law? Another thing I found pretty appalling in this meeting was the kids that are not wearing masks right now. It is pretty appalling how you are actually treating them. They are just as good as my kids who are wearing a mask. They're just as good as any other kid. You cannot be putting them in separate areas of the school. You cannot be treating them like there's some people with leprosy or something. What have we learned all these years of, in how to treat each other? This is absolutely appalling. It's the worst thing I've ever heard about happening in our school, is treating kids differently just because they are not wearing a mask. They are following the rules of the law. They are following everything, and you're treating them very unfairly. One thing I feel also you didn't discuss is the rules of quarantining. I understand they discuss masks a lot, but what happens when the masks become optional? Do the quarantine rules change? I understand that masks from 6 to 10 days after an infection, et cetera, were discussed, but the quarantine rules in general were not discussed. So I would like to have some more about that. Another thing on your February 28th date, the February 28th date has absolutely no significance to children. It was a date decided by the governor to relieve some of the mandates that are taking place, but it was periodically stated not for schools. So why are we choosing it for schools? Again, you seem to be just randomly following things that you're picking and choosing that seem to just fit what's in your mind and not what our community is thinking. Lastly, I also want to mention the PTA is organizing a meeting, a fundraiser. In the fundraiser, they are.
Thank you, Rishi. That's 3 minutes.
Sorry.
I appreciate
Thank you very
your
much
time.
for your time. Thank you.
Thanks.
And we have one more speaker signed up, Jeff Duncan.
so I'm last, so I guess I get extra time. Is that how it works?
I'm sorry, no.
First off, thank you everyone for hearing me out. My wife Heidi and I have two boys at Lion School, a kindergartner and a second grader. As our oldest son Jack, in the midst of COVID, was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. It certainly changed our world, rocked our world. And one of the things when we were in the midst of being at the hospital with doctors and nurses everywhere, we had two primary questions for everyone that would listen. Number one, what can or can't Jack do? The answer was nothing. Jack can do everything like every other six-year-old at the time. The second question we had was, what about COVID? Mind you, this was in June of 2020. Okay, so this was fresh. And to a person, the doctors and nurses said, Jack is at no greater risk than the average 6-year-old. Okay, so that hasn't changed. So we look at it from the standpoint of Jack is one of those 80-odd kids that require additional attention, but we don't expect him to be treated differently. Okay, we are very thankful as a family for the staff, teachers, especially Nurse Sydney over at Lion, for the attention and care and compassion that they've showed for our family. We don't know where we would be without her. That said, I look at it from the standpoint of we've taken so much from our kids over these past 2 years. And while we may sit here as adults and say, it's only 2 weeks, it's only count them off on our fingers, 8 school days. It's more than that. It's way more than that. You know, I volunteer as a coach for youth sports. I coach 6, 7, and 8-year-olds. And I've done that for the past several years. The number of kids over the past 18 months that have come off the field or off the ice crying, it's almost every single one of them. That's not by chance. That is because these children are crying out for help. Okay. They're getting upset. They're emotionally unstable. Okay. And what we're robbing them is this chance to be normal. We owe them normalcy, not 2 weeks from now, not based on some arbitrary date that things might change with our great Governor Pritzker. Our local and our state policies have robbed our children of so much over the past 2 years. And I'll close with, I appreciate every single one of you for stepping up and being part of this board. None of you signed up to be health experts. I would agree with that. However, every single one of you signed up to be a leader in our community. And again, arbitrarily setting 2 weeks because some expected, date that something might happen, that's not leadership. You have set a date where no one will be happy. The pro-mask crowd will not be happy. The pro-optional crowd will not not
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. And that's your 3 minutes. I appreciate it.
Anyone, guys. This is
a
bad spot to be in.
Thank you.
Scott, there is one more who signed up and I did not call. So I think I have found this person, Ninorta. I'm going to promote who I think is you, Ninorta Gabriel. I hope this is you. If it is not the person I promote, please let me know. Did I
Hi.
find the right person?
Hello.
Hi.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, hi. First off, thank you. I know it's a long night, so I appreciate and I thank you for giving me the chance to speak. My name is Ninorta, I'm a District 34 parent. Truthfully, I was really reluctant and unsure if I was going to speak today. I also work in education, and with that comes pressure from all around because it is boards like you, superintendents like yourselves, that make the ultimate decision of who gets hired and who gets let go. Not to mention the pressure that comes from colleagues and unions that have differing views. I know there are teachers and staff in District 34 that feel like they have no voice and are afraid of negative repercussions, including being ostracized by colleagues and possibly lose their jobs, especially those who are not tenured. When we went into education, we never imagined living and teaching through what we just endured. I mean, we've all lived it. It was almost 24 hours, 18 hours a day of nonstop, remote learning, working, teaching. We never went into education for fame, riches, or glory, but we went in for the children and to make a positive impact on our communities. I'm going to go a little bit off script just based on all the conversations that happened. There was a lot of discussion going back and forth. You kept asking for more time, data, metrics, and in the meantime, our surrounding district has been in person since fall of 2020. What is being weighed into their analysis? And is there a way for us to collaborate with them on their thought process and planning for pulling back of some of these mitigations? What is it that they know that we have been unable to figure out? Should we be meeting with them for a collaboration session to help us out? At the start of the 2020-2021 school year, that's almost 2.5 years ago, while District 34 was still in remote, our district, where I worked, was in person. And personally, having worked in healthcare during the SARS 2003 outbreak, I had a lot of anxiety going in. I knew I needed a N95 mask. And when I worked in 2003, I had a fitted mask to protect me. I worked the entire year as an immunocompromised person with a newborn at home. I worked the entire year with an N95 mask because that was what the community wanted for their students. I know the anxiety that comes with change, but we now have therapeutics, vaccinations, and thankfully natural immunity to protect us. To the District 34 teachers, administrators, support staff, please know you are not alone. We are here to support you. Please speak up for your students. Yesterday, my child got home. My child threw aside all of her Valentine's treats and said the best part of her day was the hug she got from her teacher. Our children love their teachers, and we are a community that support them. Henry Adams said, a teacher affects eternity. He can never tell where his influence stops. It's masks today, but I'm sure there will be other issues that we will contend with in the future. Have courage and be the voice for our children and for each other. We are one nation under God, indivisible with liberty and justice for all, including the smallest members of our community. Thank you for your time. And I know it's been a long night for you all.
Thank you for joining us and for sharing your comments. Thank you very much.
Okay,
And that
now I believe we are officially, we've covered
Okay.
everyone who has signed up who is here.
All right. Thank you, Kathy. That was a tremendous task pulling everyone into the meeting. I appreciate that. Now we'll move to our report section. We have the number 1 FOIA report, number 2 True North Board meeting report, number 3 Phase 1 construction change order report, the number 4 monthly budget report, the number 5 referendum expense report, the number 6 current year financial projections, number 7 the extended school year and supplemental learning experience report, and number 8 the following meeting agenda. Does anyone have any questions about the reports? Okay, I see no hands raised. I'm going to move along.
I guess my only, sorry, I raised my hand. Maybe it was slow.
I didn't see. Oh, I see it. Now I do. It's because your background is kind of yellow.
Do we need to discuss the agenda given the context of our discussion earlier and the follow-ups as laid forth with respect to the mitigation plan and such?
I will make sure that that will be on the next month's agenda. Is that good?
Yeah.
All right. Dane, is that all right?
Yes.
And I believe, Dr. Deli, you did state that he plans on having that done before the next meeting even, so we should see some preliminary work ahead of that too.
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Dolan. Any other business? No other business right now? All right, I'm going to move to adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everyone. And we finished under, I think I had a 11:10 as my window, so thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you for everyone for coming. Thank you for all 400 people that watched on Zoom, and I don't know how many people watched on YouTube, but thank you to the community.